If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
People who believe they are being haunted by something otherworldly, demon, shadow, paranormal, or evil. What did you see that freaked you out so much?
I'm being haunted, and I don't know what to do. I need help, I'm pretty scared. My boyfriend and I have an apartment, and I've always thought it was haunted. When we first moved in, the dials for our heaters would be turned all the way on. I'd wake up in a pool of sweat sometimes and find them all turned on. There hasn't been much since, but suddenly there's it going on, and I'm terrified. I woke up the other night to banging. I could hear someone walking around. I felt like I was being watched. I kept hearing talking. I don't even remember when I fell asleep. Before I fell asleep, there was a huge bang at the end of our bed, like someone took their fist and slammed it on the wood. My cat was even spooked so much that he came up and slept around my head. Peaches and my other cat, Pecan, have been acting strange as well. I decided to write this because my boyfriend just saw a tall black figure walk into our spare bedroom. I just heard something fall as well. I have an idea of what I need to do, but I don't know for sure. The house I grew up in is over 100 years old. People were born and died in that old farmhouse. I would cleanse the entire house multiple times a year since the same things would happen there. Why would this seemingly suddenly show up? So I work at a church in northern Germany. Last night it was my turn to check one last time before closing the church. The church is about 750 years old. It was dark outside, and I didn't bother turning the lights on. A few candles were burning near the altar, about 15 meters from the entrance. I walked down the aisle to blow them out, and halfway down the way I suddenly had the ice-cold feeling I wasn't alone. Blew out the candles and got the hell out of there, almost jamming the lock. Now I'm a bit scared when I have to go near my church alone in the dark because I'm more than sure there is some spooky presence in there. All that wouldn't be that dramatic if I weren't the pastor who is now afraid of going to his church in the evening. Have you had any experiences regarding ghostly encounters in churches? I'd love to read your stories. Old Germantown Road, Oregon. So I have been meaning to share this for some time. This is my ghost encounter. I was working security in Oregon less than a year ago. I would work late nights and have to commute from Hillsboro to northern Portland. The quickest way to do this was through a place called Old Germantown Road, which went up a mountain and came down a series of switchbacks into Portland. One night on my way home from work, going up the switchbacks, I was talking to my wife on the phone while passing a popular turnoff. I looked to the turnoff and saw what appeared to be a person in a black hoodie sitting on the ground with their arms wrapped around their legs, clutching their knees to their chest, slightly looking at me. I could not make out the face. At that moment, when I looked at the person, I said to my wife, "What the duck is that?" My phone then immediately shut off, not just dropping the call but turning off. My radio turned off by itself, and my headlights started to flicker on and off. It gave me the most uneasy feeling I had ever felt. When I had passed the spot, my lights came back on, my radio came back on, and my phone returned to life. I looked back to see if anyone was there, and no one was there. I wish I were making this up. Generally, I don't believe in ghosts. But that is some of the most horrifying shit I've ever seen in my life. I know what I saw, and it haunts me to this day. I was 17 years old. The cool thing to do at the time was go to the Embreeville Asylum in Chester County to explore. For backstory, the asylum was abandoned since the 1980s. At one point it was a mental institution, then it was an elementary school, then a hospital, then a home for the mentally unwell. The asylum consists of 10 to 12 buildings, each the size of an elementary school, all of them dilapidated. There is an unmarked cemetery across the street with numbers for all the graves but no names. I went with a group of about 8 people at about 10 p.m. We went into several of the closer buildings, and they were creepy but nothing out of the ordinary. We proceeded to what we referred to as the main asylum building. It was the biggest and the original building. This one gave me the creeps. There were gurneys in the hallways, things were scattered everywhere, and it just had a cold vibe to it. We started moving through the building and found our way to a stairwell. I took the lead position and got walking. My buddy and I made our way to the 4th floor and realized the others were not behind us. We went on ahead anyway. We approached a hallway intersection where to the left and right of us were large day room type rooms that had hallways that led to open rooms that widened as you entered. Before I turned the corner, my buddy asked me if I said something, to which I responded, "No." He told me he swore he heard something. At this point I turned the corner and pointed my flashlight toward the day room. In clear view, I saw something cross left to right inside the threshold of the door. It had the figure of a person, but with a light directly on it. It had no pigment. It was like the absence of color or light. Blacker than the night outside. It had dimensions to it. No legs. Human-shaped. I turned tail and ran. I never again went back at night. I left feeling cold and terrified. It has stuck with me since that day. I think about it a lot. My Ouija board experience that haunted me forever. One night at my friend's dad's, we decided to play the Ouija board, being that the previous 2 times we played, nothing serious happened. So the 3 of us started playing and asking questions and having fun getting our questions answered. I'm literally getting chills thinking about this. So we keep asking questions for about 5 to 10 minutes. It stops answering us and just starts making the figure 8 over and over on the board. At this time we were 12 to 13, so we had no knowledge whatsoever of what was going on. After it stopped making the figure 8, it started going to Z and then O fast. Back and forth. Again, if we had the knowledge we have now, we would have said goodbye. Being so, we didn't know what it meant, we kept our hands on. After getting a very weird feeling, the lights started flickering on and off fast, and the garage started opening and closing fast. Friend's dad had gone out for the night, we were there alone and played in the garage. Without saying goodbye, we all ran into the house and huddled in the basement until his dad got back home. After that day we each never touched a board again, and it definitely made us believe in that stuff. Definitely not something to play around with. Sometimes I wonder if that's the reason a lot of bad/weird things happen in my life. I know we all go through some weird and bad times, but it's a lot for me. It makes me think it's something from that experience. I was born in a Victorian terrace. Had a mum, dad, and 2 older brothers. When I was about 7, I was walking down the attic stairs. They were in a spiral, when I turned to face the landing and I saw an old man leaning against the banisters about 2 meters in front of me. He had blood down his face and on his shirt. My parents told me that they knew about him. We would see him walking across the landing from the living room. You could see the entire upstairs landing from downstairs. He would noisily walk down the attic stairs most nights. Every step had a distinct sound. Our neighbors saw him once when they came round. Dad asked a man across the street who had lived there his whole life about the history of our house. He said that before us an old couple lived there, the woman died, and the man became an alcoholic. One day a neighbor found him outside the door. He'd tripped up the curb and smashed his head. He helped him in and put him in a chair, and left him. He was found a week later having bled to death. There's loads more, but I had to condense it. When I was 12, my family and I lived in a tiny little house on the corner of South 11th Street in Copperas Cove, Texas. Things were normal most of the time, but we started having weird experiences. My mom would get the strong smell of flowers, and things would go missing or would be moved, etc. One night when I was up late watching Nick at Night, this was probably in 2000 or early 2001, I saw a figure in my doorway. I was propped up on my elbow, and my feet were pointed at my door. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move, and I looked at my doorway. It was a black mist, but I could clearly make out a head and shoulders. It kinda just faded into nothing for the rest of the body. It was turned with its side to me and was walking towards my bathroom door that was perpendicular to my bedroom door. They touched and made a square shape. It stopped walking and turned to me. I could see its shoulders square, and I looked like someone standing facing me. We sat there, both just looking at one another for what seemed like forever, before it turned back to my bathroom door and walked into the bathroom. When I got up to investigate, nothing was there. I wasn't scared. It had a wonderful energy, and I felt almost as if it was there to protect me. A few months after this happened, my father got on post housing, and we moved to Fort Hood. Its name has recently changed, but it was Fort Hood at the time. After living there for a few months, weird things started happening in my room. The lights would flicker, my TV would turn on and off randomly, sometimes spending minutes just turning off and on, etc. One night I was sitting on the edge of my bed watching TV, and I had just finished eating. I placed my plate and fork on top of the TV and was just minding my own business when the fork flew off the plate at my face and landed beside me on my bed. Needless to say, I was completely frightened. I had been expressing all the weird things to my best friend, and she told me I needed to tell whatever was there to get out. But I felt weird about that until one day it was ducking with my TV, and I stood in the middle of my room, no one was home but me, and I screamed, "Get the duck out of my room. Leave me the duck alone." Over and over again. That was the last time I had any real paranormal experience. Since then I have always believed people when they say they have experienced the paranormal. It's hard not to believe others when I had such concrete experiences as a kid. And I thought this would be the perfect place to share my ghost story. Has anyone else ever had an experience with a mist-like apparition or a poltergeist? My son is 12 years old. He told me this evening that for the past couple of months he has had several experiences in our home that have scared him. He said that he often hears knocking in the house, specifically when his sister and he are home alone. He said that he has heard scratching next to him while lying at night and has seen shadow figures in several places throughout our house, including right outside his window, at the end of our long hallway, and in the living room. He also said he hears voices sometimes throughout the house, but there's no one here. This evening he was playing outside in the yard and came running in because he said he heard loud panting/breathing, and it scared him. He thought it was a big dog or something from the woods at first, but then he said he realized it sounded like it was right next to him. My girlfriend and daughter have also said that they have heard the knocking, but my son seems to hear it all the most. For some context, we live in a house that was built in the 1970s and have lived here for about 10 years. As far as I know, no one has died in the home, but I don't know the entire history of the house. The house does make noise, and I'm sure that could be some of what he hears. We have some issues with the foundation settling. I don't think he is lying to me. He seems genuinely afraid, and his heart was racing when he heard the panting earlier. I am somewhat familiar with ghosts and the paranormal, but I am really not sure how I should proceed here. Should I try to find a way to prove there is a ghost here? Should I attempt to communicate with it? Any recommendations would be helpful. Strange lights while out searching for my dad? My dad ended his life in a forest near my house. While I was out searching for him after the fight that led to him leaving and me following later to find him, I saw two bright objects. The only way I can describe them is orbs slowly floating away from me. It was almost midnight, and I was searching for my dad with my family. I had earlier been screaming for him, shouting his name, etc., but heard nothing. Just as I was about to go home, I shouted one last time and heard, "I'm here." It was such a distant response that I convinced myself that I was just hearing things. When we went back to carry on searching for him, I split off from my family and searched near where I had heard him. As I was walking, I suddenly looked into the tree line just to my left and saw these two beautifully bright orbs. I wasn't scared or spooked, I just stopped and watched as they slowly floated away into the tree line. I couldn't believe what I had just seen, but the stress of the situation quickly got me back on track, and I carried on searching for my dad. He was unfortunately found the next morning. However, I have been recently going through therapy, 8 years since it happened. Don't bottle things up, and we came onto the topic of these things. What do you all think they could be? I remember them just being very bright, almost silvery or white, and they floated together, almost like eyes. It felt like whatever it was watching me. I didn't get scared or feel any feeling at all, really. I just keep thinking how it was exactly where my dad would have been if he shouted back to me. I would appreciate any thoughts. Shape-shifting spirit/demon? My family and I have lived in a haunted house for 16 years now, age 3 current. As much as I'd love to backtrack our entire story, it would be much longer. I'm working on a book that will hopefully be published in the next few years. To cut to the chase, aside from our usual spirits whom we know and have done history on, there's one that stands out. We have a spirit/demonic presence that takes on the form/voice of different family members. We have seen it as my brother, dad, and grandma. When I saw it with my brother about looking for help, I'm unable to find anyone else's story that matches even merely similar to mine, but recently this presence has made the struggle unbearable. If anyone has a similar story or idea of what this might be, I would really appreciate hearing your thoughts. For an added note, this spirit has followed me between my divorced parents' houses and now to college, and I'm beginning to feel scared and helpless after recent events. Thank you, everyone. So about 4 years ago, 2 of my cousins, my brother, 2 friends, and myself went on a ghost hunt. We were notified of a place in the area known for haunts and such, and it was completely closed off in the 80s due to satanic practice having taken place there. Originally, the land had a house, a shed, a windmill, and a barn on its premises. An older lady lived there, passed, and the house burnt down. A farmer bought it, keeping the burnt down structure, barn, shed, and windmill in place. He gated it and put cattle in. Before this, people who visited the place reported sightings and such. In the 80s, people would venture out there to see if they could hear/see anything. Reports of a woman walking around, women's shoes being found randomly, etc. were reported. A group of teens began performing satanic rituals where animals were sacrificed. Police closed down the location, and people stopped talking about it. It recently started becoming a hit place for teenagers again in the past 5 years. So, the group I mentioned in the beginning and I went. I and one of the friends stayed in the car in case we needed to bolt out, as the farmer was known to chase people off, which only makes sense. My 2 cousins, brother, and 1 friend went in. I started hearing scratching on the roof of the car, but figured I was going bonkers. My friend, we will call her L, noticed the windmill was flying in the opposite direction of what it should have been. Granted, there was barely any wind, but the wind should have caused it to blow in the other direction. Take in mind this windmill was going rapidly. A good 10 minutes passed, and we heard growling, looked up, and the others were flying back to the car. Come to find out, my older cousin witnessed an arm reach over a hay bale, grab his friend, who also noticed it, and run to get the other two. While running to get the other two, a loud scream echoed, which they claimed sounded demonic, and they took off. The farmer chased us off, ending the story. A year ago, we stupidly decided to go back. This time it was my older cousin, my brother, my aunt, and myself. My cousin walked up to the tin shed that was standing, knocked 3 times, and we saw a tall shadow race across the shed. A low growling was heard. We decided to stay back to see if maybe we could see more activity. We walked down into the area where the farmer typically kept the cattle. In both cases, the cattle were moved to another location off the premises. My cousin, who I've never seen cry in my 23 years of life, began bawling and fell to his knees. He kept stating that he felt like he was experiencing the worst depression of his life. We got him up and were about to leave when he grabbed his phone and started recording. A tall, dark shadow walked across the plain, stopped and stared, and walked away. At this point, my cousin starts regaining his composure again, and we run off. Very spooky place. We unfortunately were not aware of the rituals that took place there until after this. It still gives me the creeps to this day. To this day, we still drive by randomly. The windmill still blows in the opposite direction, but if you stop, it will stop with you. I'm a part of a paranormal group in Southeast Texas. We travel all around helping people who experience hauntings or ghost activity. One house we were at in Groves, Texas, had a room that had a creepy story about a monster coming out of the closet. While investigating, the team members each had walkie-talkies. I kept getting a weird vibe in that room and had this weird image or memory from like the 70s of a man hurting a young girl in that room. I'm not a psychic or anything, so it was uncomfortable having this persistent thought. We had a flashlight lying on the floor by the closet, and it was turned on. Every time I asked a question, it would blink almost in response. Suddenly, my walkie-talkie starts getting static. By that time, everyone was in the room. And no one else's walkie was picking up anything despite being on the same channel. Then, we all hear this angry man's voice yelling from the walkie, and then a small girl's voice crying. I lost my shit and gave my walkie to someone else. I needed a breather after that. Ghost, or demon? Footprints on bed. My friend lives in a legitimately haunted house in the woods. He and his girlfriend have witnessed activity like cupboards opening and shadows passing by, and he sent me these images that appeared on their clean sheets one night after they had just started making the bed. They left the room for 15 minutes at most, and they live alone with no pets. The markings look like distorted handprints and left a very light pinkish white powder. For context, the same details were told separately by 2 extremely credible people I've known for many years. I am certain it's not a hoax. The property is a lake house in fairly remote woods. More people have seasonal camps there than year-round homes. He's been remodeling steadily since he moved in, and the paranormal activity isn't constant, but it's continual and seems to be getting worse. We wonder if it may even be a Native American spirit or possibly demonic. Has anyone seen or heard of anything like these powdery prints? Thank you. Haunting experience in 1950s house, Hampshire, UK. Before I moved to London, I used to live in a 1950s built house in Hampshire, UK. My parents had purchased it in '99 from an old couple who had lived in it since it was built, so no one had died in it. The first strange thing that happened was the cats wouldn't stay in the house. They would always bolt out for some reason. After my parents started renovating, my brother and I both started to feel like we were being watched in the house, and at night in the living room, you would always feel like something was watching you through the new glass doors from the hallway or the stairs. After a while, if we were sitting downstairs, we started to hear footsteps moving from my bedroom and the room above, walking to my brother's neighboring room, then across the landing to the hallway to my parents' room. My parents both dismissed it as the pipes cooling or the floorboards settling, but you could distinctly tell exactly what boards the footsteps were treading on. At one point friends came over. I was alone, and as you walked down the street, you could see into our living room. They asked if I had relatives staying as they had seen people sitting on the sofa. Things started to move. You'd place shoes by the door, and then they'd be under the stairs, or things like keys would be moved somewhere else. Then it gets really creepy. One day I had run a bath and was listening to music on the computer in the study in the next room. It had been a while, and the music had stopped as the PC had gone into standby mode. I had been in the bath about an hour and fell asleep, and as the water had just gone past my nose, the music on the PC shot back on louder and woke me up, bearing in mind, in those days you had to mash the keyboard or really jiggle the mouse to wake up the computer, saving me from potentially drowning. I took this to mean whatever was in the house wasn't bad. However, a few weeks later, I woke up bolt upright like something had woken me up. It must have been around 2 a.m. My door was open onto the landing, and it was a bright, full moon night, shining through the hallway onto the brick landing. I looked, and to my terror, I saw an old man, but he wasn't standing up. It was like he was lying down on the stairs, and his head was at foot height, staring around the landing wall, directly at me. The moonlight was on his face. It haunts me to this day. I closed the door and slept with my light on for the rest of the night. My parents sold the house in 2004 when they moved to New Zealand, and when I spoke to my dad about it later, he said he knew something was in the house but hadn't wanted to scare my brother and I. He'd had his own experiences. He'd heard the same footsteps on the floorboards, and in the mornings when he'd get up and make tea for Mum, he'd hear footsteps behind him in the kitchen walking towards him, something brushing past him, and the taps would turn on by themselves. Years later, when I told him about the old man I'd seen, he said on a few occasions he'd been in the lounge at night, and in the reflection of his reading glasses, he could see the exact same man sitting in the armchair behind him. My dad is a massive skeptic, a policeman back in the day, and a no-nonsense project director. Apparently he was so freaked out, he went to the public records office to see what our house had been built on. The area had been made up of old mansion estates back in the Victorian times, and it looked like our kitchen had been built over a pathway leading from the old big house to an ice house outbuilding. He thinks maybe it was the servants or whoever walked that path. Very spooky. My grandfather is haunting the family that bought the ranch he worked on. My family is distraught. This is a story that I thought I'd never need to tell or get help with. Could someone please help me make sense of this? I have no supernatural experience. My grandfather was an immigrant from Germany to the US. He served in World War II as a German translator for the US. He then bought a ranch in Texas and raised his family in the city of Austin. I don't know how they had the money to buy 2 properties. He passed away from dementia in 2018, and we sold the ranch in 2021. The mother of the family that bought the ranch reached out to my cousin on Facebook after finding the surname somehow and said she and her kids are seeing a man, dressed like my grandpa, walking around. She never knew my grandpa, much less any of my family. We had no idea who got the land after selling. She also said they're seeing angels with black wings flying around the pasture we spread as ashes. I keep finding negative things about angels with black wings online. Then we find out more. Here is another message that was sent to my cousin from the mother. We moved in here only 8 weeks ago, and as a woman of faith, it's been a series of strange, frightening things that I certainly wouldn't usually tell a stranger. Odd smells, everything breaking, house almost catching fire, illness, strange dreams, seeing strange things, constant anxiety. Things that cannot be explained. My children and I are frightened. I've contacted a local pastor, but he didn't take me seriously. Could anyone help me make sense of this? Growing up, I loved that ranch. I never felt scared there. However, looking back, I've always had scary dreams about that place growing up. I'm struggling a lot with it personally. He seemed to be a great man in everyone's life. Do we need to go there and find him? We really don't know if there is anything to do, but it makes our stomachs turn considering the events that the family there is going through. Anything helps. Possible ghost or demon in apartment, please help. I've shared on a couple of different places about this now, but I'm trying to focus my search now as to what exactly is in my apartment right now so I can either put it to rest or get rid of it. My BF and I moved into an apartment that is in a refurbished, 100-plus-year-old high school. We've lived here about 6 months now, and it would be really expensive to break our lease, so we will be stuck for the next 6 months. We've had some strange shit happen, pardon my French, guys. Doors will open and shut by themselves, our bathroom sink will turn on by itself, and at night we will sometimes hear 3 knocks on the walls or coming from inside our bedroom closet. We can also set something down, like a cell phone or our keys on the coffee table, only to come back maybe 30 seconds later to find it on top of our fridge or something. Our cat is also going crazy and often will scratch and cry at the entrance to our unit, like she wants to get to something outside. She also will cry and howl if we try to close any doors in the unit, bedroom, bathroom, or even the closets. My boyfriend and I have also seen a little girl in a pink dress both in our unit and throughout the building. My boyfriend has also dreamt about her. We've looked through the building's records, the area's missing child reports/unsolved murders, etc., but we haven't found anything promising. We've also had some unexplained handprints, most of which are like 2 to 3 times bigger than my hands and considerably bigger than my boyfriend's, appearing on our bathroom and living room wall. We don't touch these parts of our walls, but the prints have reappeared since I wiped them off. We also now have a literal swarm of fruit flies in the apartment, and I literally have no idea what could have caused it, because we don't leave food or dishes or trash out and run our disposal at least twice a day. We blessed the apartment with holy water, put up protection sigils on all the doors, hung crosses in the entrance, did a salt cleanse, and repeatedly asked this entity to leave. It seems to be more active than ever. Demon or something else? When I was 4, I lived with my grandparents, mom, and uncle. The house we lived in had a massive basement that my grandma and her husband at the time used as their bedroom. My grandma, when I got old enough and well after we moved out of the house, explained to me that there was something in that house that terrified her. She couldn't sleep without a light on. If she did, she said, a helicopter sound would hover over the house, and a black thing would crawl on all fours out of the furnace room and attack her. Before she told me any of her experiences, I felt I was only imagining things because I too had experienced things in the basement and my bedroom. Things such as being nearly dragged down the basement stairs to being face to face with the shadow figure itself. The scariest thing about this thing is that my grandma has been choked by it and even managed to grab it by its hair and rip hair out of its head. My family had the house blessed, smudged, and even exorcised, but nothing was able to get rid of the entity. The house has since then been bought and rented out multiple times, with families not being able to stay in the house at night. Would anyone have any idea as to what this thing could be, or is it your typical S-demon? I've always endured paranormal experiences for as long as I can remember. Some were truly terrifying, bizarre, or painful. One particular story that I would like to share because it was by far the most peculiar and surreal experience that I've ever had happen to me. This particular occurrence also happened on 3 separate nights and away from my house, where most paranormal activities would occur throughout my life so far. So to start it off, my sister, Samantha, had met a guy named Josh who lived in Florida. They knew each other for a year or two, and Josh came to NY to live with my family for a year, where he would finish off his senior year in high school. I was in my sophomore year at that same HS. Josh was a big guy, and you most likely wouldn't think he'd like jogging, but he mentioned it to me, and knowing that I practiced judo/jujitsu and jogged avidly, he asked if I'd want to tag along, and I said, yeah, definitely, man. Josh planned a jogging route in my neighborhood that spanned roughly 2.5 miles. We started running this route for a few weeks. I'm from Long Island, New York, and my town is a suburb, so on the jog we'd run alongside a large road and a decent amount of shopping plazas and some quiet roads and neighborhoods without so much light and no stores and almost complete stillness. Well, we ran this route, and once we hit the 2-mile mark, we would split up and run the last half-mile alone. Josh would finish by running on a road alongside a field near a school for troubled youth. I would run through the neighborhood streets, passing by houses on the opposite side of that same school. It was dark outside because we would usually jog around 9 to 10 p.m. As I ran past the school, I looked to the road on my right side, as I would have to jog that direction to go home. Suddenly my fast-paced jog became a very slow-paced jog, almost as if I were running in place. I was startled and became very observant. My mode switched to survival mode. I saw what appeared to be a young boy riding a tricycle in the middle of the dark road under a dimly lit streetlight. But it was no normal boy, and it was completely gray, with no other color to it, and its limbs were moving in super fast motion, 10x faster than a human could move. It looked robotic. Suddenly the tricycle was traveling about 50 miles an hour, and he was staring at me, coming straight toward me. I was a bit worried to say the least, but when the boyish apparition got to where he was about 10 feet in front of me, he then made a sharp left turn and onto the lawn of a house directly across from me. The house had a willow tree on its right side, the side where the boy rode towards. As soon as the apparition rode under the willow tree, a portal opened up also under the willow tree directly in front of the gray boy, and without looking back at me or pausing, he rode into the black portal, which floated a few inches above the ground and was about 6 to 7 feet in height and 4 feet in width. I stared at this portal that this apparition rode through on his bike as I ran past on the road to its side. The portal stayed hovering above ground for a few more seconds, almost daring me to come in, and then it vanished completely out of sight. I finished up the last few blocks of my jog, then sprinted home and told my whole family and Josh when he arrived back at my house shortly after me. This was what happened just the first time. There were 2 other experiences, one with my friend Mike and the last with my friends Mike and Chris. The third was by far scarier than the first 2 and may explain the first experience. I'll write the second and third experiences tomorrow. I'm hungry and tired. Let me know your thoughts, please. I think I'm ready to talk about my 2 paranormal experiences. The first was when I was a teen and was living with my grandma in a 100-year-old house. I woke up to a man standing in my doorway. He looked at me and turned and walked down the hall. I realized the door was shut, freaked out, and started screaming and searched the entire house. My grandma calmed me down and told me that my uncle had also seen that same man in that room before. He was about 5 feet 4 inches and wearing an Australian Army slouch hat and greatcoat. The second time, same house, Grandma was in the hospital, and something started whistling in the back of the house. I was about to leave, and it chased me down the hall and out the front door like a freight train. It was so loud, but none of the neighbors heard it. The neighbors also had a photo of their house when they were renovating of a little girl with red hair standing in the kitchen window looking out. There was no floor at the time, and the window was about 8 in the air, far too high for anyone to stand in, especially not a child. She wasn't in the photo before or after, taken seconds apart. They had a radio that would turn itself on when they talked about it. Anyway, that's my experience. Hide and clap. Almost 5 years ago, my best friend and I had a sleepover party at my house. As usual, the sleepover is about eating home-cooked meals that I prepare, yap, drink, and sometimes invite some boys over. That time in particular we were in the mood for scary movies, so in the late afternoon we watched The Conjuring. We got frightened about the hide and clap game in the movie. After seeing that scene, we paused the movie, looked at each other, hands in hands, and promised that whatever happens, if either of us two were to use this to prank the other at any point in our lives, that person is a BTCH, and our friendship would end there. We were very, very serious. My house is already pretty scary, and many little things happened that left us with this unsettling feeling of being alone in my house, so a prank of this nature would leave us scared AF forever. We both promised, and the party went on. After dinner my friend got lucky, and one of her situationships at the time joined our party. It's something normal for us, as I said previously, to invite some guests. We all had a lovely fun evening. I got to know him. We listened to music and shared some songs. When it got late, my best friend decided she had enough alcohol and went to the room I gave her for the night, bringing her boy with her. As usual, I stayed up later, I sleep very late, and I started tidying up around the living room. I stopped the music. Closed the windows. Clap clap. My eyes were wide open. After processing the sound for a second, I started laughing. WTF, you are such a B, you say promise, SHT, and then you pull this shit, ha ha ha, FCKU. I walked up to the corridor next to the living room where I thought she would hide herself to mess with me. No one was there. Everything was silent. I expected to find her or at least hear the giggles. But there was no sound. I walked up to her room's door at the end of the corridor, and everything was silent inside. In this situation I didn't open the door, I wouldn't want to interrupt something, and said to myself that maybe that sound came from spanking or some nasty stuff. I scrolled off this unsettling feeling and finished tidying up and went to bed. The next morning I met my friend in the kitchen for breakfast. I confronted her lightheartedly. "Oh, you nasty. I heard that clapping. That scared the shit out of me. Next time, try to not get spanked so hard after a scary movie, please." She looked at me very confused and also preoccupied, telling me she didn't do anything that involved clapping noise. So I explained to her further, trying to understand with her what could have made that sound and also to understand in what moment in time it exactly happened. She wasn't the cause of it. It was like a very neat clap clap like in the movie. Nothing else could have really made it if not two hands. Like nothing that could have fallen or the wind or something can make that sound. We didn't find any explanation for it. I wasn't drunk enough to be inventing sounds. She wasn't lying. I could tell because she immediately got shivers from the thing I was telling her. We still don't know what happened that night. A paranormal experience that creeps me out today. I used to live at this house, which, I admit, used to spook me a lot. And here's a true story. The first thing is my family is asleep, and I had summer vacation as a teenager. Thus, I decided to stay up and play video games late at night. My console was in the basement, and this is around 3 o'clock in the morning. I lived in a cul-de-sac, and it was a forest behind it. In that forest on September 15, 2014, my classmate was ended by a guy that nabbed her when she was walking back home. He ended her too, and they found her body after a search. It's ducking disgusting, and it pisses me off how on the same planet we share, some maniacs are out there victimizing folks. I too had to walk back home from school, and every time I went past that vicinity, I felt an ooze of energy that made you feel like you should watch your guard. But going back to that day, I was up at night just gaming and chilling when I heard a faint knock on the basement door 2 times. Like 2 light slaps, not how a normal person would knock. The thing is you have to walk down the staircase, 20 stairs, to get to that door to knock on it. So I didn't hear any footsteps, but I shut all the lights off immediately. I think it was counterintuitive, as keeping lights on tells an intruder the proximity is occupied, but turning them off can mean going incognito. I'll let you decide that. But at the same time, my whole life flashed in front of my eyes, and this basement has so much room: 2 beds, a coat hanger, a washroom, an open kitchen, and the only thing there that was occupied was 1 sofa, a TV, a console, and me. I snuck into the washroom where there was a window that works in a way that no one can really see you, but you can see them. Its reflection works like that. Since what happened to my classmate was always on the back of my mind, I thought it could be one of those people who kidnap or extort teens, as I was 16 at that time. But no. There was no one there. Again, I don't have any videos, but what I saw was an entity behind the coat hanger that bolted at me. At that moment, I had turned off the lights. The entity resembled a shadowy figure. I freaked out like any teen, shitting bricks, hamster-level heart rate, and I then shut the console off. I remember it so vividly, but I'm just going to continue writing it. I had to go out that area, go all the way upstairs, which is like 40 stairs from my so-called low-level man cave, reach the main floor, covered in darkness, then go up more stairs to the 3rd story and run into my parents' room upstairs. I had my own room, but for the time being, as I was afraid, I lay on the mattress in my parents' room. I then was thinking, what the duck was that? But I felt safe around my mom and dad. It was 3:40 a.m. I then got my nerves together and closed my eyes for 15 minutes. Only to open my eyes and see the same ducking shadow figure staring directly at me in front of me whilst my mom and dad are sleeping. I started praying to Jesus and kept saying, I rebuke all dark energy in the name of the Holy Spirit. I had never prayed so much in my life. I prayed for 2 hours nonstop. I kept chanting God's name, and I heard a voice whisper in my ear, don't worry, go to sleep, everything will be fine. And I honestly don't know if that was God saying that to me or if that was a demonic spirit faking being God. But I'm a master of Murphy's Law, so I'm guessing it's the latter. Again, I feel like I was being haunted, or I would have died spending another minute downstairs. I used to have these kinds of experiences, and I don't as a young adult today. But I think back, like, was there actually someone behind that coat hanger? Was there a squatter? Was someone actually staring at me while I was sleeping? My classmate being ended in such a way that may have left that forest haunted alongside the homes that surround that area? All I know is that strange things happened over there, and we moved shortly. And everything today is good. Share your paranormal experiences. My old neighbor moved back home with his parents after having a nasty fall in June of 2022. We'll call him Mark, fake name. For a while, his house had viewings but wouldn't sell. One day, while walking, I kept seeing the blinds moving in the front bay window, those vertical, rectangular ones that slide side to side. The movement didn't seem natural, almost like a jerking movement with breaks in between. But given it was the middle of July, I assumed the AC was probably blasting, and with the house empty of everything but significant appliances, the air had room to go cray-cray. Come to find out, the AC compressor and fans weren't on when I returned from my walk. And when I went to an open house to view just for shits and giggles, I don't remember there being any ceiling fans. I learned Mark never moved. He fell in the bathtub while taking a shower. He fractured his pelvis and femur and caused damage to his femoral artery. He dragged himself out of the bathroom and into his living room to try and reach for his phone. He wasn't able to get up to reach for it, so he banged and shook his window blinds while screaming for help. He likely died the same day from blood loss. For nearly 3 days, his body lay there while his family drove all the way down from upstate. When they arrived, cops were there to help with a welfare check, and minutes later, the EMT and fire department came. Out of curiosity, I asked Mark's parents what happened, and they told me he had a nasty fall and was going to move back home with them so they could help with his recovery. The last time I saw Mark's parents was before they signed all the paperwork to close the sale. I had asked them how he was doing with recovery, as I hadn't seen him after that day, and I knew they were staying nearby with more family. They clammed up and then confessed the truth. My guess is they didn't want anyone to ask questions or be nosy about the situation. Knowing this info, I snooped a bit more and asked surrounding neighbors if they remembered anyone living in the house before Mark. I ended up getting the name of the previous owner before Mark. I'll call him Anthony, fake name. With this info I was able to fill out forms with my county's vital records department. Turns out Anthony also died. In the bathtub. He had an aneurysm while being bathed in 2012, and when his ex-wife came to drop off the kids, according to the neighbor one house down from Anthony, she found him floating in the water. He had drowned. I was and still am absolutely gobsmacked. I have a new neighbor now, and I don't want to spook him. I'm a bit concerned for him as he lives alone like Mark and Anthony. If he happens to ask, I'm not sure if I want to tell him the truth or not. My church is definitely haunted. Here are a few stories of the ghosts. Story context. My church was built in 1875, so it'll be 150 years old next year. Stop roasting me for accidentally saying 100. It's a big church and has 3 levels, but most paranormal activity happens on the top floor, where the sanctuary and offices are. Directly off the sanctuary is a meeting/lunch room. We call it the GPR room. The choir members wait to come out to service in the room, and all the committees meet there too. A lot of activity happens in here. None of the ghosts truly like crowds, but my mother cleans the church, and I will help her, so often I'm in the church with very few other living people. All this activity, plus other stories I'll share later, has happened in the last 3 years of going to this church. Story 1, Whispering Man. In the GPR room there's a male ghost who whispers in your ear, like directly into it, and there's no warning, so he scares you every time. His tone sounds confused and like he's asking a question. He'll repeat the question a minute or so later if you don't talk back to him. But the thing is you can't understand the words as they are muffled, so you have to tell him, "Sorry, sir, I can't understand you," then he'll repeat the question or leave. He only talks to you if you're alone in the GPR room. Only once did he speak to me when there was another person in the room. At least I, my mother, and my sister have experienced the Whispering Man. I've heard him about 4 times now. Story 2, Chatty Ladies. In the sanctuary there used to be 2 fancy green felted wooden chairs directly behind the altar. When the altar area was renovated, the green chairs were moved to a different area of the sanctuary. Sometimes I'd hear laughter and a conversation coming from the area the chairs are located, with feminine voices, and I'd hear their voices and the pauses between one lady talking and another answering back to her. Sadly, again their words were muffled, and the chairs were recently sold, so I haven't heard them in a while. I'm the only one who has experienced them. Story 3, The Little Girl. There's a little girl who's probably no older than 8 who is the only ghost that you can actually see. She wears a white dress that, from Googling, dates back to the late 1800s or early 1900s, and with Shirley Temple curls, she appears like a physical person but gray like a black and white movie. She often plays and giggles at the back of the sanctuary. But one night last fall, I was sitting in the GPR room practicing music for choir, and I looked up in the doorway to the hallway because I thought I saw something, and I definitely did. The little girl was pinching the sides of her dress up so she didn't trip and twirling around and around, watching her dress catch the air and blow up a giant smile on her face. I sat there watching her and smiled, myself mesmerized by the pure joy she was having as the pianist played the song. The ghost girl looked up and saw me watching her, and just as quickly as I noticed her, she suddenly vanished with the blink of an eye. My mother and sister have heard her giggle, and my mother saw her, we think, well, more a swoosh of her dress as she went running across the back of the sanctuary where she plays. My family and I lived in a house that had mimes. It was about 15 years ago. It mimicked the sound of my husband coming home from work. His whistling as he came up the front stairs, opened and shut the door, took off his work boots, went into the kitchen, and made a pot of coffee. I could hear it all, the sound of him tapping out the old coffee filter, turning on the water, etc. Then I heard him fill the kettle as if to make me a cup of tea. That was out of character. So I got up, I had been trying to get my 2-year-old son to nap, and checked the kitchen. No husband. It wasn't even time for him to get off of work. My 2-year-old heard him as well. A few months later, I was at a workshop, and my husband stayed home from work to watch our son. Same exact thing. He was trying to get our son to nap, and they both heard me come home and proceed to the kitchen to make coffee and tea. He said that it sounded exactly like me, my steps, me hanging up my coat, etc. But of course, when he came out to see me, I wasn't there. Then one night, my husband woke me up because our son was crying in our room. He insisted that I go get him, because he was lazy, but also very chicken of our house at night. When I got to my son's bedroom door, he had already gotten out of bed and was in the process of opening his door. I kind of opened it, but slowly so that he wouldn't fall backward. As I opened it, I saw him in a white nightgown. Just for a second. But actually, he didn't sleep in white nightgowns. He slept in Spider-Man pajamas, and he was fast asleep in bed. In the instant that I saw him, he disappeared and the crying stopped. My husband and I were awake for a long time after that, totally freaked out. That house never felt negative. But it was very active. Someone walked around the house every single night for the 2 years that we lived there. Toys would always turn on at about 2 in the morning. Things would disappear and then reappear. We could hear a newborn baby crying in the house but could never pinpoint where it was. We could also hear a woman getting angry in the kitchen pretty much any time that we tried to listen for it. So many other things happened there that I can't even remember, but it was constantly active. To the point that when I think back on it, I wonder why it wasn't more of a big deal. Why didn't I try to get a paranormal team in there? It was 2002, possibly there wasn't a ton on the internet in regards to groups? I don't know. I just never thought about it. I do paranormal investigations, and I would love to get my hands on a house as active as that house was. I drove by it a few times, wanting to go and knock on the door and ask the new owners, our landlord sold it after we moved, if they were experiencing anything, but I was too worried about freaking them out. The house got knocked down about 4 years after we moved out. One thing about that house, we had the best luck while living there. Our relationship was really good, we were making lots of money, we managed to get out of debt, save money for a deposit to buy a house, and were able to buy our first home just in the 2 years that we lived there. It had really good vibes. I don't do research on hauntings of anything, but after living on a street that was built on Civil War battlegrounds in the past, I can confirm that was the only time I've ever personally experienced full-body apparitions, poltergeist activity, and violent/malevolent energies across an entire street. Like every single family had stories like ours of things moving around in plain sight with no physical motion against it, pictures spinning on walls. My mother tells this one and still looks afraid years later. Faces appearing in windows at night even though the windows were 6+ feet off the ground because the houses were raised. The worst for me was when I and the local kids were playing hide and seek outdoors. I was 11 at the time, so old enough to know what I was seeing. I was hiding out under a car waiting on a friend across the street to be found. I suddenly saw heavy boots walking up the gravel driveway around the other side of the car. Spooked me because these were grown man shoes, and they came from nowhere, and I hadn't heard the steps until they were beside the car. They stopped in front of me, so I popped out thinking it was someone from my house and saw a full-grown man, easily 6 feet plus, standing there in a long coat and boots. He scowled at me, and when it took a step towards me, I turned to run, and when I looked back, it ducking vanished. Sent me screaming into the house, and we didn't play outside at dusk again. We only lived there less than a year, long enough for me to finish a school year, because that house horrified us. This happened 15 years ago, but it haunts me to this day. In high school, in the late 2000s, I had saved up all my money from summer jobs to afford a nice trip to Italy, where I'd study abroad for a bit. Since I paid out of pocket, it was important I behaved to stay on the trip, or I could be expelled and shipped back home early, losing out on the extra dollar I paid. Mostly hotel fees and ticket costs. Anyway, it was boys and girls separated, so we all got assigned roommates and would always be buddied up at each hotel we stopped at. I really liked my roommate, we got along well. After hitting southern Italy, we moved up north, heading to Milan. The tour bus we were on got a flat, and after we changed to the spare, we were told we had to stop by a neighboring town to change it to the actual tire needed. This town was in a tiny rural area where no one had cell reception because of how far out it was. The only access to the outside world was through a huge desktop computer in the concierge of a clearly old building that was repurposed as a hotel. We checked in and began unloading our bags. Now once we are in our rooms, we are usually locked in with tape. If you break the tape seal, you get sent home for not following rules/sneaking out. So it's already night, and we unpack and are locked in for the night. My roommate, let's call her Penny, and I noticed a tiny door behind our wardrobe, so we moved it together and opened it. Tons of dust inside the room and dark as hell. Using our phones, we found a tiny light switch we yanked. All of the floors, ceilings, and walls inside were painted white, and in the middle of the room was an old hospital gurney from around the 1950s. It had brown leather straps, both for the wrists and for the feet. So Penny crawls a bit inside because she's like 6 feet tall, and I'm going in there, and she dares me to sit in it. Being the idiot I am, I do it. Then she straps me in so she can take a picture. The entire time we're laughing and cracking up, when the gurney suddenly moves with me on it. I scream, and Penny runs to set me free. As we exit towards the doorway, we notice the gurney moves again, violently towards us, and we rush out of the room and seal it with the wardrobe. For the next 3 hours we hear footsteps and the gurney slam against the tiny door. I couldn't sleep, so I said F it, and we opened our window and shimmied the balcony of the second floor to get to our friends in the other room so as not to break the seal. We tell them what happened, and everyone is spooked. Our teacher hears us making a commotion and rushes over to the room we were in to ask what the noise is about. We explain in full detail what happened, and Penny is as white as a ghost. She's been quiet this whole time. The teachers don't believe us and threaten to send us home first thing in the morning for our behavior. So I challenged my teacher and told her I would dispute this with the student board unless she went and saw for herself what was going on. She then went to the room and, after 2 minutes, returned and said we could stay there with the others. Her face was a mixture of horrified and confused. Upon checkout, we asked about the room, and the innkeepers acted confused, saying they didn't know what we were talking about. The teachers refused to speak about the incident with us. The rest of the trip was a blur, seeing as how Penny and I couldn't sleep at night the days after that. I've seen a lot of personal write-ins here and thought I'd share my story. To this day, the hair on my neck stands just thinking about it. I don't wish that upon anyone. Spookiest experience of my life, first apparition story. This incident happened last winter, and it still gives me goosebumps. So my GF and I went to visit my grandma last Christmas vacation, and on our drive back we saw something that neither of us have ever experienced before or since then. It was probably between 3 and 5 p.m., so no sun out, with lots of clouds, but not quite dark yet and storming pretty decently. As we begin going down a hill through/nearby a nature preserve, we see someone on a bicycle coming out from the left side of the road, closer to the bottom of the hill. No cars around, just me in the passenger seat and my girl driving in the slushy downpour, so we were going maybe 40 miles per hour. This person on a bicycle seemingly begins to cross the road at a pretty rapid pace and shows no signs they are stopping and no care to our car. As they continue to cross, we continue to slow down the best we can, and my girlfriend has corrected the steering and eventually swerved from this bicyclist's path. It ducking dissipated into the grooves of the pavement right before we hit it. Literally, the entire set of moving objects and shapes melted into the sealant and grooves of running water on the pavement, resembling the way things swirl around when you're tripping. I find this situation to be quite murky, as my girlfriend was completely sober and the driver was also sober. We both observed the same object, and he attempted to avoid colliding with it. On 2 separate occasions, as we lay in bed about to sleep, we heard disembodied sounds, a cat meowing in the room connected to mine, even though I don't own any cats, and a baby crying in the guest bedroom, even though I don't have any kids. Had to share, think about that bicycle boy from time to time. Surrounded by forest, not even a driveway for him to come from if it was a real dude. Am I being haunted by a demon? I've recently moved into this new house built by my parents, and since then I've started seeing stuff from the corner of my eye, weird black or white shadows or warps. I literally thought I was starting to have schizophrenia. I have to mention that I'm used to ghosts and such. At my old house, I was probably haunted by a poltergeist. I was hearing loud banging from the closet, hard footsteps, voices right next to my ear, and things would randomly fall, scaring the shit out of me. Anyways, I've tried to communicate with the current spirit one night, and when I asked what it wanted from me, the ghost stopped messing around with me for that night. Literally earlier, I saw a hand above my head in the mirror for a fraction of a second, and then I felt like I was being tickled, though the ghost never tried to hurt me or anything. The thing is, I read online that demons sometimes try to cover themselves as good ghosts. And another thing that happened after I started seeing stuff in the corner of my eyes was that I started feeling emotionally and physically drained for no reason. Does anybody know what is messing with me, and what should I do? Haunted cabin. My fiancé and I stayed in a cabin near the Smoky Mountains this past Saturday night for a quick getaway. I think it may have been haunted. Would love to hear what y'all think. Here's what happened. We got to the cabin around 7 p.m. Saturday. She got an off feeling when we pulled up and wanted to check out the place before we brought our stuff in, though I didn't know this was the reason at the time. Neither of us mentioned it to the other at the time, but we both felt something was a little off. It wasn't totally comfortable to be in that space. It felt at times like we were being watched. We both chalked it up to being in a remote area in a cabin with so many windows without blinds/curtains. We were also sleeping in a loft that was pretty visible through 3 sets of windows. We chilled in the hot tub that night after dinner. Both of us kept stealing glances inside for some reason but still hadn't mentioned anything to one another. I kept worrying about who/what might be in the dark just beyond my field of vision in the woods. Again, kept chalking it up to having read too much Stephen King. I found out later that she swept through the cabin while I was covering the hot tub back up because she had an uneasy feeling like someone was in it. Later when we went to bed, she was more anxious than I've ever seen her. She's intuitive as hell, so I was getting spooked too. She didn't want to freak me out with the ghost stuff, so she only mentioned out loud something about worrying about someone breaking in. I started dozing in and out eventually, and all of a sudden she was sitting up, shining her phone's flashlight toward the wall/couch opposite the bed. At the time she said she had spooked herself looking at the stacked pillows. She told me later she thought she saw something over there watching us. We doze back off. She wakes up drenched in sweat and goes back to sleep. Around 3:30 a.m. we're woken up by the loft's fire alarm. It beeps loudly 3/4 times over the course of maybe 5 to 10 seconds at most before abruptly stopping on its own. The kitchen smoke alarm doesn't go off. We hop up, get dressed, and start turning on lights to see if we see smoke. No smoke at all, but we both smell a distinct burnt smell like that of electrical wires that are beginning to melt. The smell goes away within 5 minutes of us being awake. We are unable to identify the source of the smell, and it never reappears. My original thought when the alarm woke us up was that someone was trying to lure us out of the house. I'd felt so uneasy and so watched since we got there. We turned on the outside lights and peeked out. No one that we can see. I'm starting to think this might be supernatural at this point, but I don't want to freak her or myself out any more than we already were. Nothing else happened, but we both felt watched and uneasy the rest of the night. We stayed awake, packed our stuff, and waited out the rest of the night downstairs. There were a few creaks and other noises, but I know cabins tend to creak a good bit since they're made of wood. I was sitting where I could see the loft, and I couldn't shake the feeling of something being up there. We got the hell out of there as soon as there was enough daylight to see our surroundings while packing the car. We later looked back at pictures of the loft and found the reflections of two figures in a couple of pictures. Shadow person at Grandma's and Grandpa's. When I was little, I lived with my grandparents on my dad's side. My mom was abusive and an addict. She was doing drugs while pregnant with me and gave birth to me addicted. My father was an addict too and let this happen. So my grandparents took me in. I remember being little, like 8 or 9, and seeing things from my peripheral vision. It was a black figure. I usually would see it while I was sitting and watching television in the living room. It was always staring from the hallway. I would turn to try and see it, thinking it was one of my grandparents checking on me, but it would always be gone. I would never see it directly in front of me, it was always just in my peripheral vision. When I was older, maybe 18 or 19, I would have sleep paralysis. I would be sleeping on my back in my bedroom, and I would feel like my bed was shaking. Then I would not be able to move or talk. I would try to break free and was able to break free a couple of times, but it was so hard. Usually I would just fall asleep. I would always see a shadow person while the sleep paralysis was happening. I saw it, but it was blurry, like staticky. This one time I could not break free, and I was crying, and I thought about praying. I'm not religious, but I do believe in a higher power, which to me is God. So I just said God is with me, and I am on his side. When I thought those words, the sleep paralysis and shadow person just left. While I was having sleep paralysis, I wasn't able to move and talk. Every time this happened, I felt weak and tired, like if I closed my eyes, I could fall back asleep. This only happened at my grandparents' apartment. I have no idea why. They are the most bright, positive, loving people I have ever known. Thanks for letting me share my story. The ghetto where I'm from is divided by a golf course. One side of the street is project housing, and the other side has nicer homes built in the 30s 90s before the projects were there. I lived in a 1934 two-bedroom house with bright yellow tile. I was 26 and lived with my GF, 24. After living there a few months, my GF started saying she felt uneasy in the hallway, which was tiny and had a crawl space in the ceiling. I brought my dad over to get up there and take a look because, there could be something scary up there. He found nothing. Insulation. A while later I took a nap for about 2 hours. My girlfriend in the next room folding laundry after work. She comes to wake me up, shaking my shoulder. She asks how long I had been asleep. I said a couple of hours. She said, "So you didn't just walk through the house?" I said no. She said, "But I just saw you walk through the hallway." "Are you sure?" "Yes. It wasn't me. No one else in the house." Fast forward a year. I'm trying to quit smoking, and I lost my vape. My buddy has been staying at my house for a couple of weeks. He is helping me look for my vape. I walk out to the car and get in the driver's seat. I'm digging between the seat and the gear shift. Suddenly something or someone is talking in my ear. Not whispering. Right in my left ear, there's that sob, right there. I'm frozen. It's the dead of night, no one around. My buddy is still inside. I finally, after about a minute of complete silence, open the car door and go back inside. I tell him what just happened. That's when he said, "Probably the same person that calls my name at night." He has been hearing someone say his name from behind him on the couch he slept on at night. I'm creeped out but not enough to move. The rent was great, and I was not easily shaken. Fast forward a few months. My mom comes over to pick me up to go shopping. I throw on a shirt in front of the hallway and say, "Hey, how's this for today?" My mom turned around, and her eyes went over my head. She started to back up and tried to adjust her eyes. I said, "What?" She said a black shadow just went up the wall behind you and into that room. I thought, oh, so now there's that. Fast forward to a few months later, and I'm watching TV in the living room with my buddy. We hear a loud bang. We go into your kitchen, and all the cabinets are open. A single jar of Nutella on the floor. And a huge punch hole in the wall beside the refrigerator. Interesting. I'm still not leaving. Lol. Fast forward a few more months. My buddy moved out. My girlfriend and I broke up, and she moved. I was living there alone for the first time. I go to lie down one night. My bed was freshly made, so the covers were tight. I cut the light off and laid my head back. Suddenly there is pressure on each side of my feet, like something has one hand beside each side of my feet and is pressing down as if you look over the top of me. It lasted all of 30 seconds before I sat up and cut the light on. Nothing there. Still not moving. Fast forward. I get a new GF. She starting over. She reports seeing faces reflected in the hallway mirror. I'm like, yeah. Weird things happen here. Nothing has ever tried to harm me, so I stay. This brothel there at some point due to a red light on the porch. I'm sure that was just a rumor. One of the neighbors said someone had shot themselves in that house. But there was no record of it. I could go on about other instances in the old haunted house. But I've gone on long enough. It was 2009-13. Rent was $625. I wish I had never left. I think I'm haunted by my boyfriend, and now he is communicating with my son. 15 years ago, at 17, my boyfriend and I were coming home from a date when we were in a car accident. A drunk driver T-boned us at a light. I was severely hurt, and they thought I was going to die. Unfortunately, my boyfriend did die. He died on the scene. He was my high school sweetheart, and I had known him since kindergarten. It was extremely hard for me to lose him. It is still hard to talk about. The last thing he did was take his hand and try to brace me from the impact. It started about 2 weeks after I was able to go home and 5 weeks after the accident. I would wake up to him screaming my name. I just thought it was a dream, but one day I heard him call me by my nickname that he gave me, and I saw a silhouette of a shadow figure sitting on the other side of the bed. Then it disappeared. There are things like this constantly even now. I never told anybody because I didn't want my family to think I'm crazy. After 5 years I finally decided to move on and met someone else after college. We decided to move in together. I was packing my stuff and decided to leave my stuffed animals with my parents to put in the attic. I know I put every stuffed animal in a box because I'm kind of ADHD, and I check and recheck, but when I got to our new apartment, the stuffed animal my deceased boyfriend had given me for my 16th birthday was in one of my moving boxes. I still continued to see his shadow and hear his voice. However, I never brought this to his attention. My boyfriend and I decided to get married, and then we had 2 kids. My son is about 4 years old, and last week he was in his room playing, and I heard him talking to someone. Like it was a real conversation. I just thought maybe it was him using his imagination. I walk in to ask him who he was talking to, and he said, "You know who it is, Mommy, it's..." My son said my deceased boyfriend's name. I asked him to repeat it in case I misheard it and it was his name. I asked if he talks to him a lot. He said not a lot but sometimes. I haven't told my husband about this as I'm scared, and it's a conversation I don't want to have. He doesn't believe in ghosts. I'm scared he will think I'm nuts. Sometimes I wonder that myself. But now my son is involved. So I'm here asking if anyone can tell me what this could be. Could it really be him? What should I do about it? If it is something, could it hurt my son? Possible haunted ritual house in the woods behind our farm. This is a relatively old story that my dad has told me a few times over the years, but with Halloween coming up, it's been on my mind again. I myself have never been able to witness the house, though the description I've been given by multiple men 20-something years after seeing it gave me a very vivid mental image. To begin, I would like to mention that my father is a highly religious man, a preacher's son, and does not believe in ghosts or anything paranormal in the slightest. Nothing seems to spook him either, but he still swears up and down that he felt something unnatural that scared the sh out of him even just from mentioning the story to me on the rare occasion that he would bring it up. Back in the late 80s, he and a few friends would regularly hike over the waterfall/creek bed behind our farm and would follow the trails up until they eventually met the frontage road off of the interstate. Well, one night they decided to take a different route to go around the backside of another farmer's land, mostly to see the animals because they owned emus and other large pets that weren't common in the local area. Supposedly after leaving the area and continuing into the woods, at night of all wonderful times, they managed to stumble upon what is described by all 5 men, 20 years later, as a Blair Witch look-alike house. It was a very, very old home, and my dad claims that just looking at it gave him this ominous feeling, but of course they had to go inside and check it out. Inside the house was a vintage cottage-style home that was probably built in the late 40s or early 50s, and the group was instantly met with writing and symbols in strange Latin-like languages with a few English graffiti pieces that quoted a supposed satanic or pagan worshipping ritual, with certain pieces describing how to sacrifice a human soul to some, supposedly demonic, deity. My father still claims to this day that certain symbols were painted on the walls in blood while others were clearly spray paint. And I find it easier to believe because he also worked as a firefighter for years before this happened and had a lot of experience with having to see human blood and dismembered bodies on the freeway after car accidents. Past a small living/kitchen area was a stairwell that was so small that their shoulders would physically brush either side of the wall as they went up, and the stairs went straight, stopped at a small landing, then turned right, so as you started up, you could not see what might be standing at the top. At the top of the stairs a door led to a large attic-styled bedroom where actual chain manacles and locks hung from one of the walls near a circular window at the end of the room, which was also completely covered in weird symbols, graffiti, and now more obvious and frightening large dried puddles of blood that had seeped into the floors and walls. Allegedly, once they were upstairs investigating the room, they swear that they heard someone moving up the stairwell behind them quickly, but when they looked back, there was no one there. Everyone essentially told me that it sounded almost like heels clacking on wood, and now completely spooked, they rushed back down the stairs to see if someone was playing a prank on them and was hiding downstairs. Surprise, surprise, they found nothing and no new footprints in the dust and grime that differed from the ones they left on their way in. To keep things interesting, I met with each of the guys separately to ask them about what they remembered, expecting to maybe find a crack or something to prove that maybe they were exaggerating, but when I asked them, I got the same answer from each of them with no hesitation. They got the same details right down to the minute that they entered the house and the minute they left, but here's where it gets really strange. They left the house and, for some unknown reason, decided to try walking back from a different route, using a compass to approach from the east instead of the south. They did this test more than 10 times that night, walking from every possible route or direction, yet they always came out at the front entrance of the house even when the compass and common knowledge of the area showed that it was physically impossible to be at the south end of the house when they moved in a straight line from the north, east, or west. There probably is some scientific explanation for it, but I haven't found one yet. These guys knew those woods literally like the back of their hand and still do to this day. The final time that the guys came back and found themselves standing at the front door of the house, they began to feel physically ill, verging on feverish, and finally decided that it was time to give up when one of them nearly fainted, and as they turned to leave, the man who nearly fainted turned, looked up, and pointed at the circular window at the front of the house on the second story. Everyone looks and immediately sees a tall female figure hunched over, standing in the window watching them, though they see no features on her face other than 2 large, dark-colored eyes, and it sort of shuffles in place slightly before turning and walking away as if it were heading to the stairs at the end of the room. At the sight of the figure actually moving, they all took off running through the woods, ending up on the side of the interstate about 3 miles from my dad's house, where they originally started from. They eventually made it back to my dad's place, though they claimed that they felt as if someone were following them the entire way, and my dad's cousin gets up to get some water from the kitchen only to announce that he swore that he saw the same figure standing outside of the kitchen window near the edge of the woods, close to the woodshed. Thankfully, nothing ever came from the experience other than a collective state of absolute terror when the subject is brought up. They wrote off what his cousin saw as paranoia or pareidolia, though 5 years later they decided to return to see if the house was still standing. Miraculously it had fallen in on itself and was nothing more than a pile of rubble, and they never went back. I always joked with my dad and would ask him what he would do if he went back and found the house standing the same way it had back then, trying to give him a reason to let me go and see the place for myself, but with trespassing laws being far more prevalent in today's times, it would be nearly impossible without either getting shot or going to jail, as it was not on our property. I don't know. It always gives me the creeps thinking about it, but I never considered the story to be true until I did this little mock interview with all of the guys. And when I say that these grown men are scared to death by this story, I mean it. Seeing them get physically worked up and frightened by just telling the story really caused me to be less of a skeptic. Maybe it was a demon, maybe I'll never know. This will be my first time sharing this experience. I would greatly appreciate any feedback. I am a building service contractor and have no experience in storytelling or writing. I'm just happy I found a place to share. Thank you. I have no explanation for any of the things I witnessed. I have never seen anything like it before or since. I do admit that I have never in my life felt so helpless. I was alone, no one else that I know of saw or heard the things I did. I did manage to get some shoddy video with an iPhone. I still have the phone, but it is crushed, and I have no idea how to recover any media. I am 44 years old now. My experience happened early in the month of June 2018, around 2 a.m. I had just finished work for the day, and it was a beautiful night. I had the windows of my Ford Econoline van down, enjoying the country air. I live pretty much right in the middle of Iowa. A nice house on 27 acres, my shop is on one side of the driveway, the house on the other, large oak trees, larger pine trees, and of course a yard light. Neighbors across the road are maybe 150 yards away, and more neighbors are across the creek. Anyway, as I'm pulling in, I see maybe 3 or 4 sets of eyes under or at least near my porch, nothing super unusual, as I have, from time to time, a family of raccoons try to settle that close to the house. I noticed the eyes, and that must be the reason I didn't go straight inside the house. I figured I'd stop in the shop to grab the .22 just in case I got an aggressive mama coon. Before I step out of the van, I notice how full and bright the moon is, above the tree line directly west of me. As I sat and appreciated the scenery, I watched the moon go across the sky, like it would only in fast forward. This I videoed briefly. Maybe there is a legit reason the moon appeared to make about 3 hours of movement in 2 minutes. But at the same time the moon appeared to be still and normal. I shut off the camera on the phone. And then I hear this very unusual and very loud sound of large pieces of concrete being moved. I can't say that I saw large pieces of concrete moving, but I heard it and was very focused on this, as this is not a normal thing to hear out here. So as I am trying to justify seeing the moon move in fast forward and knowing I just heard my driveway open up, my thoughts are maybe there's an earthquake or a sinkhole or I'm having some kind of episode. Still in my van, windows open, I remember the eyes I saw when I first got home 15 minutes prior. But as I go to get out of the van, I see a huge thing moving towards the house coming from where I heard the concrete moving. Not only do I see something huge, I hear the noise I will never forget. I have no idea what I saw and struggle to find the words to describe the noise it was making, but as I'm fumbling for my phone, trying not to move too fast to get noticed and keep an eye on this huge thing that is in the shadows, but when this thing roared, it sounded like a mechanical dinosaur/bear/warthog/giant bird screech. I froze. Literally frozen in fear. And I just witnessed, before the ungodly roar/screech, this thing reach up and run its hand or paw or claw. I can't explain, I guess, because I didn't see it long enough to comprehend, but it stood from the ground with one arm or wing extended up to the bottom of the second-story bedroom window. I shouldn't say it stood, it was walking, but that's the size of the thing. It did not move gracefully, but it didn't move loudly, like when it wasn't roaring. I did not hear its movements. I have no idea where it came from, but the way I processed it, it moved the driveway apart and came from underground, walked up to my house, ran its hand or whatever along the bottom of my daughter's window, screeched at the house, got behind my van, and screeched again. I say screech, but it was a lot more than a screech. At this time I gave up on the idea of running to the shop for a rifle. I had a feeling that this thing came for something, but I don't know why. It could have busted in my house and tore it apart if it wanted to. Anyway, when it was behind me, I had my phone recording. I did not get a visual of this thing with the phone, at least not a clear shot. You could see a large thing moving and hear the noise, but I pulled out of there and drove straight back into town. The first lit up place was a car wash where I pulled in and rocked back and forth, so confused about what everything was. As soon as the sun came up, I went home. I only had a feeling that it came for something, and the way it made the noise made me think it wasn't there to harm my daughter. I say that, and although I felt it wasn't there to harm Tiana, I only felt that I thought that. I can say that I left with the intention of leading it away from the house, but I was helpless. There was nothing I could have done to harm the thing or protect my only child. I know I witnessed something I will probably never understand. I can't bring myself to speak about it to my daughter or anyone else close to me. I showed the video to some people but did not explain to them what they were looking at. Because every time the thing made a noise or was in view, and even when the moon was moving, the audio would become super distorted. It sounded like you were on the other end of a phone that someone was holding out the window while driving 80 miles per hour. I don't know how to process this experience. I wonder, was this a demon? Was this my imagination? Did I lose my mind for an hour? Where did it come from? Where did it go? What would move concrete that big? What the heck was the moon doing, and whatever happened to the raccoons I saw? If it was my imagination, how do I explain the video? I witnessed something, I saw, I heard, I felt the ground shake, but I will never understand. Like I said before, I'm not a writer, just a guy from Iowa wondering about some crazy night. I own and operate a company. I speak to my employees and my clients daily. I am active in my community, and as far as I know, people have never questioned my sanity. Anyway, thanks. Currently living in a notoriously haunted 1800s plantation home, I had an experience. So as the title says, I'm currently living in a notoriously haunted 1800s plantation home. My partner's mom is a partial owner, and we're staying here indefinitely. Before ever visiting, my partner told me that she doesn't like to stay there alone because it is spooky. She's heard strange noises before and generally feels like she's being watched in certain parts of the house, particularly the apartment kitchen. So we're living here indefinitely, and the place is beautiful. It certainly feels historic, and some parts are spooky, but I don't feel anything overwhelming. I've had unexplainable experiences before, so I try to stay calm and approach things rationally while keeping an open mind. With that being said, the kitchen is creepy, but it usually isn't too creepy. Before my experience, I didn't really think anything of the hype. The kitchen is a long hallway. Our entrance is on one end, and directly across from us is the laundry room with a door to the outside. To the left is the old house, and to the right is outside. The light switches are on the right wall, about 1/4 and halfway into the room. A few nights ago we were preparing for bed, and I casually entered the kitchen to turn off the light, which I remembered leaving on. I unlock the door and swing it open as I enter, but I notice that I see something white move at the end of the hallway, what I initially think is the reflection of the door opening and my entrance. Thinking it odd that I had never been startled by my reflection entering the room until that point, I swung the door closed and re-entered. This time I saw no movement in the window. No matter how hard I try, I can't get any moving reflection in the door's window. Upon closer inspection, there is enough ambient light outside that the moving thing I saw could have been outside, rather than in the reflection. I'm not sure which is creepier, something waiting just outside the window or the reflection being inside the kitchen. I have since been in the kitchen alone at night and been okay. Sometimes it feels perfectly normal to go in, sometimes it feels a little spooky, but tonight, 3/4 days later, it felt overbearing. I felt like I was being watched. I was aggressively haunted for 3 months when I was 8. When I was 8, I would walk home to my townhome approximately 10 minutes away from my school. I would be home by myself every day for about an hour and a half because my parents worked, and my older brother went to a different school. I always used this alone time to sink into the couch and watch cartoons before my family came home and took over. I actually really enjoyed the alone time. I was raised in a very Christian home and was very sheltered. I would get in trouble watching Power Rangers sometimes because the bad guys were too evil. I remember being taught that after you die, you either go to heaven or hell. You don't get a say in whether you're going or not, so that means that there are no such things as ghosts. Or so I thought. One day after school I came home to the same routine, but this time standing in the corner was a dark figure the height of the door frame staring at me. It looked like a textbook Grim Reaper minus a scythe. It had a long black tattered robe with skeletal features showing. The most disturbing thing was its grin. It looked like a skeleton but wore a long grin. Keep in mind I had never heard of the nightmare before Christmas or anything else I could relate it to. Of course I was startled by such a horrific sight, but I literally didn't believe what I was seeing. I remember saying out loud, "Wow, my imagination is really jacked up." I would just keep calling myself a stupid little kid with a stupid imagination. It helped me make sense of what I saw and made it easier to deal with, because I see a ghost, but there's no such thing. It had to be my imagination. I saw it every day after that. It would never say a word, but if I looked at it, it would lean its head at me as if it were to say, "I see you too." It always left when my family came home, but I saw this thing every day for 3 months straight. It started to get more aggressive the more uncomfortable I became. I questioned my sanity every day. Just telling myself that it didn't make sense. I'm seeing a ghost, but how? Because ghosts aren't real. I would say I don't believe in ghosts because that's what I was taught, but that's a ghost. I didn't understand anything, and as days went by, I became more scared every day. This thing started cutting me off. I would be so uncomfortable that I would want to go to my room upstairs. It would move slowly as if underwater, then quickly zip as if it teleported onto the stairway, leaning over the staircase while looking me in my face to block me from going to my room. I was stuck in my little corner of my couch with this smiling skeleton that wanted something from me. The best way I could relate how it moved was like the ghosts from the movie 13 Ghosts. That was actually pretty spot on. I never told my parents or anyone else what I was seeing. I was afraid my parents wouldn't believe a stupid little kid, and honestly I was afraid of getting in trouble. My brother would just call me gay and tell everyone to make fun of me. One day I slowly walked home with about 6 inches of snow on the ground. I came home, and this thing, like every day, was waiting for me. I sat on the couch in fear like always. This time it zipped in front of my face and took its hands and shrouded them over my face as if it wanted to grab me, then zipped back. For the first time, I screamed as loud as I could and ran outside. My parents came outside to me crying, sitting in the snow. My parents asked me what was wrong, and the first thing I said was, "I know I'm a stupid little kid with a stupid imagination, and you're never gonna believe me." After I told my parents, I expected them to look at each other in disbelief and make me look under my bed for monsters. They turned to each other and said in a stern voice, "Why didn't you tell us?" That scared me more than they knew, because they sounded like they knew something. My parents have never told me anything that would scare me before, but my parents told me the God-honest truth as if I was grown. They told me that the people that lived in the house before us had a little girl that was demon-possessed in our house and took her own life, and now the demon wanted me. My parents immediately poured baby oil into a cap, prayed over it, and put a dab of it in the shape of a cross over every door and window in the house. After that I saw it outside my kitchen window looking in. That is the first time I saw it outside. Then a week after that, and 2 weeks after that. Then I never saw it again. Whether anyone believes me or not isn't important. Whether it was my crazy 8-year-old brain like I thought or something paranormal, I saw it for 3 months straight. No one can take that from me. My parents bought a house like 15 years ago and completely renovated it. When they first purchased it, the interior and exterior were like stepping back into the 70s, it was so cool. Anyways, the house is haunted AF. My brother and I went to the nearest high school that was a 10 to 15 minute walk from our home. One day we walked home from school together, and as my brother opened the door, we heard talking, as if someone was having a little get-together in the basement. My brother and I froze and looked at each other. I said, "Did you hear that?" He looked confused and even went downstairs to check if someone might have left the TV on. It was completely dark, and nothing was on. There was not even a single light on. I have another story about our haunted house. We had a wooden foosball table down in our finished basement that we would play with often. My dad would wake up in the middle of the night to someone playing with the foosball table. The first time it happened, he had to go downstairs to see if my brother and I were up late playing. We definitely were not. He even checked our rooms because he was convinced we were up playing around, only to find us knocked out cold. He ended up having to move the table to the laundry room and use it as a table to store things on because he kept hearing it. I actually went to breakfast with my parents 2 weeks ago and brought up all the scary things we witnessed when I was younger. They mentioned that they still hear things all the time but have gotten so used to it they ask whoever it is to quiet it down, or they simply ignore it now. Haunted land. Since I was 15, my parents have owned a cabin in the North GA mountains. It is a fun place to take friends when the folks aren't there, but the land the house sits on is very haunted, and my friends and I would smoke on the back deck and wait for something to happen. Something always happened, it just depended on how long you wanted to wait. Sometimes it would happen in 15 minutes or less, or it would take hours for something to happen. That cabin is the only place I've been where stuff happens so often, you can almost guarantee that something will happen. The most common of which would be the man and woman talking to each other across the 7-foot wide creek that runs through the back. I've tried everything to find an explanation, including looking for them, as I am now a veteran and have PTSD. I've looked for them on foot, on an ATV, through the scopes of high-powered rifles, and yes, even with night vision equipment. I even went as far as fording the shallow creek and looking around on the other side. I never even found a track or broken branch. Knowing that sound travels in a valley, I've even snuck on the grounds of the nearest other cabin to see if I heard the neighbors talking. Nope. I've been grilling steaks on the back deck and heard a little girl humming "Pop Goes the Weasel." This almost killed me because I was smoking at the time and inhaled wrong, causing me to nearly die. Exaggeration. The intriguing thing, though, was that while I was coughing, the humming stopped, and a little girl's voice called out, "Stop that." I was unable to locate her and found no evidence of her presence. The activity even sometimes bleeds inside the house, as it is not uncommon to see figures in reflective surfaces, shiny lamps, reflections in mirrors. Growing up with this, I know a good deal about the paranormal, but for the life of me, I can't figure out why the land is so active, more so than any other place I've been, and why in God's name so many different spirits are in that area. Can you guys give me some ideas? The shadow figure was only the beginning. Living nightmare, seeking help. I'm writing this at 3:46 a.m. because it hasn't ended, and I can no longer sleep through the night anymore. I don't know what they want, I don't know what will happen to me, all I know is I'm trying to keep what is happening to me documented so if something happens to me, there's some record of it. I will list the major points that have happened thus far in chronological order, the best I can. Leaving out all the other smaller experiences of paranormal freak show bits so this doesn't turn into a novel. It's too much to list. Just so it is noted, I did reach out for help to others that may understand what is happening to me. I received offers for investigators to come out to my home, but it seems it's not that simple for this case. So help has been scarce, leaving me pretty much stranded and alone. Not long after the first experience occurred, I moved to New Jersey, all the way from California, where it had originally started. From the moment I arrived, I was set at unease with being here. I wasn't wrong to feel that, and it has led me into dark places. At first I couldn't stop staring into the forest across from my hotel room late at night between 12 and 4 a.m. I was obsessed with staring out at it. I would sometimes be so drawn to it that I would leave my hotel room in the snow just to stare from outside the building. I couldn't explain it when I was asked, I just wanted to stare. Later, when I moved into temporary housing for the company my fiancée worked for, I found myself in a similar trance with a large park down the street. Just like that night in the trailer, I felt drawn to just wander out in the night to it. I started to see light, absent of a source, moving about, as if they were blobs of vague life morphing around. Sometimes they would be slow and cautious, other times, sprinting. Then one night, while sitting outside, my family beside me, I watched them spring to life. Running down the street, behind the house, moving about as if they were children on a playset. I was amused, unafraid. My younger sister saw them, she was less amused. After I finally swallowed my pride and researched what I was seeing, and I found reports, books, historical imagery, and testimonies to everything I had been seeing.
That others could describe exactly what I had been seeing, down to the very T, I was convinced.
It was time I admitted what was happening. I needed to share it with those closest to me. That would mark the night of my downfall. It started simple. I walked them beside me, pointing to the places I was seeing and feeling them. My family kept an open mind and heart. Further through the night, it began. First it was the shadow and light figures. My younger sister saw them with me, the other members of my family could not see them, only hear them. It was then I saw something new. I saw a small gray form, tangible compared to the shadows and lights, as if it were actually a part of this reality, poking its head curiously from around the doorway outside. I was still unafraid, I was amazed like a child in a magic show. I saw it a second time not long after, this time poking its head out from the upper doorframe outside, as if it was a lizard that could just crawl on walls. My amazement didn't end that entire night, all the way even to the point when the chandelier in front of my family violently swung from side to side, as if something had knocked the entire frame with a great force. I was overjoyed that my family could see it for once, and I wasn't alone. I was pleased for that one night. My family was silent. My little sister, terrified to the point of refusing to talk about what she had seen that night for many weeks. My dad would refuse to ever discuss it again, asking that I never bring it up. He told me my bringing it up was causing it to happen. 7 days later, we moved into our permanent residence. I was the first to sleep there alone with my significant other as we prepared the move. While falling asleep, I was woken with a violent image thrown into my brain of my father's and my own death, of my drowning in a void without end, a place so dark, light had never shone there. And all I could process was the desperation to get out, a desperation and loneliness I had never known. I woke gasping and shaken to the point I was drained of blood in my face. It wasn't a nightmare, I was purposely shown that. For 3 days I walked in a cold daze, barely able to communicate with my family, staring at them as if watching through a filter. On the third night. That third night was something I could never explain in words. I knew something was coming for me, and that I couldn't escape it. I was a rat in a maze. Around 9 p.m. I refused to enter the home. I was a zombie on my front lawn staring in at my house as if it was a trap with my death waiting inside. My father attempted to coax me in, but I refused. I couldn't explain why, but I knew something was already in the home waiting for me, and outside was safer. Hours on, and I was finally pushed into the home against my will, with me fighting it. I only agreed to stay in the living room with my significant other and sister, so long as someone was awake with me. By midnight, I couldn't keep anyone in the house awake. It was as if they were all under some kind of drug. I could shake and kick them, but they would only wake for a moment. The first sign of them. It was around 2:45 a.m. when the entire kitchen lit up as if someone had turned on their high beams directly into my kitchen. My kitchen was facing trees. No road. No security lights. No explanation. I kicked my sister to wake her up to see the light. She woke only long enough to see it, comment on it, and then immediately passed back out. The light blinked out almost as quickly. I was in a near panic. I knew I couldn't run, I couldn't hide, and I couldn't do anything. So, I did the only thing I could do. I waited. 10 agonizing minutes passed, and as I hid my face in fear, I heard the chair slide across the wooden floor as if suddenly kicked over. I looked up to see the corner of the living room lit up. I kicked my sister once more, unable to speak, I was so petrified. She didn't wake this time. The light blinked out. I searched desperately for a source of light, anything to logically explain it. When I could find nothing, I hid. I couldn't describe the fear I felt that night. I was convinced I was going to die. I was shaken, unable to speak, frozen, staring with moon eyes at the corner of the room from behind my hiding place by my sister. The corner was empty. That's the last I remember. I woke the next day. Unreasonably happy. That unreasonable happiness lasted 3 days. The feeling returned, and I immediately shut it out the best I could. That's when I reached out for help. I called and emailed paranormal investigators, thinking if anyone could help me, it's gotta be the good guys in every scary movie, right? I mean, they're the go-to in every story. The guys that come in and give you the answer in this climactic fashion with head spins and vomit and ceiling crawling kids. Sarcasm. I didn't receive any help of the sort. They were just groups of people hobbying their time out with as much ability to help as my neighbor. And while I'm going back and forth in emails and playing phone tag, the experiences are worsening. At one point I ended up standing in the middle of the road dazed in the middle of the night, staring at an oncoming car like it was an approaching bird, but a member of my family was there to pull me from the road. This was followed later with me sitting on the second-story window, playing on it like a child, hanging upside down. Never once in my life did I think of suicide, nor did I then. It was all a blurry dream. The furthest help I received was from one individual who could also see them. She explained I was gifted to see them, and not only that, but I was apparently cursed, and that was the extent of the help I received. They offered to come out, but every time I called them to set up a time and date, tragedy struck my family, and stuff started breaking and falling apart in the home. The ceiling collapsed, the wallpaper was torn, the electrical fuses blew, and the water pipes burst, flooding the entire lower level of the home. The oven even caught spontaneously on fire, and now we're moving not by choice, but because the home isn't fit for living, especially with winter coming. That's just the stuff we can prove on paper with plumbers, electricians, and our renter's insurance for stuff that keeps getting damaged. Then there's my family being woken by voices, doors, and objects moving. Running to me as if I have an answer for them. So much. So ducking much has happened. I'm exhausted, completely drained. I don't want to fight them anymore. I tried it, and it doesn't work. I just want an answer now. Almost 2 weeks ago I started seeing a place in my head. Like back in the trailer when this first started in California. A place in a nature reserve near the place I'm staying now. A small body of water with a fallen tree near it, hidden somewhere in the reserve. Just like then, I feel like I know where to find it. I know it wants me to go there. I'm constantly drawn to staring in the direction of it. I don't want to, I'm scared beyond belief, but I know this won't end. I want to find help, to find answers. But I couldn't find any. Any attempt will have me thrown in a loony bin. To think a year ago I was pre-med, focused, studious, experiencing skydiving, vacationing to beautiful places, preparing myself to go abroad, prepared for the waves of the world. Now I'm sitting on a laptop at 4:35 a.m. writing about experiences I could never admit to anyone outside of those closest to me because I'm losing my mind about what's real and what's not. Even my fiancé was scared away by this. He explained to me that he didn't want his family to be cursed like I am. I wrote to you guys before the first experience, back when it was still amazing to me because it was just one wow experience after 6 years of nothing, omitting my childhood full of these experiences. It's no longer amazing, it's not cool, it's not great, it's not special, it's awful. I'm powerless, lost, and I have no control anymore. I plan to go to the place they want me to. I have to find out what they want. I can't live my life in fear like this. I'd rather handle it now than wait a lifetime as a rat. I'll continue to reach out for help, hoping one of these paranormal groups is actually legit and not just scary movie hobbyists. I didn't even cover half, not even 1/3 of the experiences. Just going to try. If any of you have any experience with this, reach out to me. Creepy Shadow Man. Not the most terrifying story, but it scared the hell out of me. I was born and spent 26 years living on a tiny little island in the south of England. This island is just a bunch of country roads and fields and is known to be one of the most haunted places in England due to its history. A friend and I were driving home along a long road, a road where there are no houses for a few miles, just a large forest along most of it. I thought I'd add that beyond the forest are 3 prisons, 2 of these are still open, one of them was built back in the 1700s, and all 3 have military history, one being an old hospital. It was around 3 a.m., and we were just chatting away as I drove down this creepy road, with no street lamps, so my high beams were on. We were just going round a sharp bend when a dark, man-shaped shadow appeared about 3 meters in front of the car in the middle of the road, so I slammed my brakes on thinking it may have been a person, at 3 a.m. in the middle of nowhere? And this thing made its way right into a hedge to the left. With my high beams on, I surely would have been able to see if it was a person. It just appeared in front of me. The hedge just leads to dense forest. I was genuinely terrified, and my eyes were watering so badly. Borderline panic attack. My friend didn't see it right in front of us. 12 years ago. I was 18 at the time, living in St. Mary's, Ontario. I was friends with 2 others and acquaintances with the third person in this story. We'll call them Tom, DK, and Harry for the sake of not outing them online. Tom and Harry were really close friends, both into the darker subcultures. I didn't know Harry so well. They both liked to talk about seeing ghosts, which for the most part I treated as BS because they admitted they'd go to the St. Mary's Cemetery, off Kane Street, at night, read passages from the Necronomicon, and supposedly things would happen. We all know that the Necronomicon is a work of fiction. However, Tom was really persuasive and had some really fun stories. The 3 that stuck out for me were the St. Mary's Screamer, Old Will's Tomb, and the Beast in the Woods. Please note, at this point, I was Mr. Skeptical and was the buzzkill who'd point out the logical explanation at the end of the story, even if the story was fun. Plus, I figured Tom was making this crap up. You know how teens are. But anyways, the stories. St. Mary's Screamer, the cemetery has 2 entrances, one on Kane Street and the other off Charles. Along the Charles Street entrance, there are 2 nicely spaced rows of trees running for about 200 yards back along the main pathway. The story was that there was a legend about this creature that, if you were walking along that path at night, would let out this unearthly shriek. If you kept walking and your eyes were downturned, you'd be fine. If you looked up, it'd drop from the trees above, throw a garbage bag over your head, and get you. And you'd never be seen again. Woohoo! Given that we don't have any disappearances happening in St. Mary's, I figured this was Butkus, but still a fun little tale. Old Will's Tomb, I'm pretty sure it isn't actually a William on the tomb, but this was 12 years ago, so I picked a name out of thin air. Anyhow, this tomb was in the entrance area of the cemetery, before the chapel on Kane St. So the story was that if you walked up to Old Will's tomb, knocked 3 times on the door, green painted steel with a grate at head level, and said hello, Will would wake up and speak to you. I can't remember my logical explanation for this one, but having never seen the place, I think I assumed it could be that a homeless person occasionally slept in there. I did not, at this point, realize the doors were welded shut. Beast in the Woods, Tom claims he and Harry were down in the old section of the cemetery when this happened. See, you come in off Kane Street and past the chapel, and the road dips down this hill. In this section of the cemetery, the gravestones aren't in orderly rows like everywhere else, and the road comes really close to a small forest. Unlike the previous 2 sections, there are also no lamps. In the forest, if you strike out from the deepest part of the old section, you can walk about 5 minutes and find a ring of graves that were taken back by the wood. These suckers are old. Anyhow, Tom claims that he and Harry read from the Necronomicon one night and then wandered down to the old section, planning to visit the graves in the woods. According to Tom, that area always felt heavy. So they travel the path and are approaching the woods when they hear this unearthly growl. Tom claims he didn't have a light, but all he could see was rows upon rows of glistening teeth before something started lumbering through the forest towards them. Of course, I suggest dog, bear, werewolf, and he just looks at me like I'm nuts and says that the mouth on this thing was big enough to swallow a man. So, fun stuff, right? Well, Tom, DK, and I decided, what the heck, let's go ghost hunting. We went twice, both late at night, around midnight, and wandered all 3 areas. Except for the graves in the forest, I straight up refused, tripping hazard in the dark. I was boring as a teen. Well, DK was a bit of a problem. Not for the reason you'd think, based on his name. He was just a very full personality. He really wanted to see a ghost, but he's so full of life and humor that it felt like, if there was anything, it might be scared away. I, of course, was the skeptic, and rarely do skeptics actually see anything. Tom even faked an experience, pretending to get pulled towards the forest at one point, so his credibility went downhill really fast. He couldn't lie to save his life, so when DK and I cross-examined him, it kind of fell apart. He also stopped talking with Harry, so he really only had us to go with now, and as long as DK was along, it seemed like nothing was going to happen. And now we get to the good part. Please note, I am going to try to make this a bit more narrative than the above. No embellishments, I promise. So Tom and I are sitting around at his house one evening working on Warhammer, and he gets talking about some more ghostly experiences. DK is not around this night, can't remember why. I'm half listening, partially focused on the project. I think it was a story about seeing his grandmother in the house we were currently in. But eventually he looks at me with this funny glint in his eye. Hey, we should go back to the cemetery. I give him a side eye, raise an eyebrow, and sigh. Why? The last 2 times we went, nothing happened. It was boring as hell. Tom waggles his eyebrows. But DK isn't here. And I'm telling you, Dick keeps scaring them away. But I'm sensitive, I attract them, and you're pretty neutral. You don't believe, but you don't disbelieve either. If just the 2 of us go, something might happen. Tom. It's already midnight. Great. By the time we get ready to go and make it into town, it'll be about 1:30. Ever hear about the Trinity? If we're at the cemetery when it hits 3 a.m., all the better. I grumble and argue for about half an hour before finally giving in. He's really excited, and I don't have many friends, so why disappoint him? So we arrive at the Cane St. Gate closer to 2 a.m. I park the car a ways down the street. St. Mary's Cemetery isn't closed at night, but on the other hand, we're not supposed to be there, so if a cop drives by and sees my car parked in the visitors' parking lot, they'll come in and kick us out. So Tom and I get out. I don't remember it being especially chilly, but I had a light leather jacket on anyways and gloves. I get cold easily. And into the cemetery we go. First, we cut over to the Charles Street entrance and start walking under the trees where the screamer is supposed to lurk. It's pitch black, a cloudy night, no danger of rain, and the area is lit every 50 yards by a lamp. We wander the pathways in that section for a while. I do not wear a watch and have no idea what time it was. Eventually, I look at him, exasperated. Nothing's happening. He shrugs. Well, maybe it isn't out. Let's go talk to old Will. I follow him across to the Cane Street section of the cemetery, to old Will's tomb. The tomb is really small, a pair of doors, metal, with a grate in them, welded shut. There are no lamps nearby, so you can't really see inside very well, but you can see there's room enough for about 4 coffins/sarcophagi. The corners of the tomb are crumbling, and if you walk around in back of the tomb, you can actually climb a small hill to get on top of it. There is absolutely no way for the average person to get inside. I wander around the perimeter, nothing feels any different, like I expect it to if I were to experience a haunting. I get back around to the front, and Tom's waiting for me. I give him the let's get on with this look. You should knock. He gives the tomb a look. Something feels weird tonight. I sigh again. No, it doesn't. I don't feel anything. So knock. So I knock. Once. Twice. Thrice. Hello, Will. Diddly squat. We wait. And wait. And I'm turning to go when Tom grabs my arm and pulls me back. And he reaches up and knocks again. Once. Twice. Thrice. Will, are you there? Just writing this, I got the same sort of chill I got right then, like someone ran an ice cube down my spine. From inside the crypt, I hear something. It's not a quick rattle of a rat knocking something over in alarm from our voice, nor is it the flapping of wings like a bat. Describing it is really tough. The closest I can say is that it sounds like a plane propeller starting up from stationary, but really slowly. Or, do you remember those toys kids could swing over their heads, and they'd give off a deep whoosh noise as they spun around? And the faster you spun it, the louder and more consistent the sound is. Kind of like that. And note, this entire time I'm staring at Tom, because if something was going to happen, I wouldn't put it past him to fake it. But he's standing there, stock still, a panicked look on his face as this sound starts getting louder and faster. It picks up for about 5 to 6 seconds, no more than 10, before whatever was making the noise comes out through the grate in the door, aka between his and my faces, as we're standing on either side of it, and disappears off into the cemetery. And I'm telling you, I didn't see anything. But the sound clearly came from inside the crypt and then left the crypt and disappeared. Being the skeptic, I look at Tom. You just heard something. I did. Describe it. I'm not telling you what I heard. A whipping noise, like something was flying around in a spiral. Started in the crypt, and then flew out between us. Shit. Yeah, that's what I heard. Another chill this time, strong enough to make me shiver. I was hoping he'd describe it differently. He's got this slowly growing grin on his face, despite still being pale as death. This is going to be a good night. We need to visit the old section. I turn around, and from where we are, I can see the old section. The path disappears into pitch darkness, there are no lamps out there. I know he's going to ask me to go into the woods to visit the old graves, but after what just happened, it feels right. So I agree, and we start walking. Almost as soon as I pass the chapel, I get another chill, but this one's radiating all the way through my body and won't go away. I assume I'm just being chicken, but the deeper we go into the old section, the closer to the forest we get, the more unsettled I start to feel. Tom isn't saying anything, walking about a step ahead of me on my right-hand side, putting himself between me and the hodgepodge rows of gravestones. The dark seems to get darker all around us, the moon is covered by clouds, and there are no lanterns. I can just barely see the edge of the tree line getting closer and closer as the path winds down towards it. The farther we go, the more freaked out I get, it feels like someone's watching me. The temperature is dropping like a rock, I'm trembling. My eyes are darting back and forth, to Tom, to the forest, to the graves, too. Holy shit. About 50 yards from the deepest part of the cemetery, I freeze in place. Tom walks another step or two before he realizes I stopped. He turns around slowly. What? I deliberately look past him to the right. Then to the left. And then spin around in place. I'm not sure what I'm seeing, and I sure am not going to prompt him. Tom. Spin in a circle, and tell me what you see. Exactly. He does. About halfway through the turn, he stumbles a little bit, and I'm watching his face twist more and more into a freaked out expression. This whole time, I am getting that incredibly strong feeling of foreboding, like we should not be here right now. When he looks back at me, he's shaking, but he says nothing. What do you see? We're surrounded. By what? White shapes, about 6 feet tall. Look like people. How many? 4. How close? Right on top of us. Run. We went tearing back up the hill as fast as we could. Both of us were out of shape at the time, but I can't remember ever putting in a better 100 meters dash. We didn't stop until we were well past the chapel and standing in the gateway to the cemetery. I look back. Tom. He looks up and freezes again. Just past the chapel. All 4 of them are lined up watching us across the path. Keep running. We didn't speak again until we were in the car, tearing back towards his house, and even then we were about 10 minutes out of town before either of us felt it necessary to speak. By the time we got back to his place, it was about 4 a.m. Just to clarify, because I was going for narrative flair there, what I saw in the old section of the St. Mary's Cemetery were 4 vaguely humanoid figures, standing roughly the same height as me. 2 were in front of us on either side of the pathway, and when I looked behind us, another 2 had appeared, where nothing had been a few seconds before when we passed. There was no fog that night, but you could essentially describe what I saw as 4 foggy humanoid shapes, very distinct and extremely localized. No features, limbs, nothing, but definitely within proportion for a human being. That was why I specifically told Tom to look around us, but not what I'd seen. That's why I asked how many, how far, etc. if he was going to make something up. I wasn't going to give him anything to build a story off of, and he described what I'd seen in perfect detail. And dear Lord, I was feeling very much like we done goof-stepping foot into the old section. And then, after reaching the exit of the cemetery, they had followed us as far as the chapel and lined up across the path, perfectly evenly distributed, as though blocking the way. If they were ghosts/spirits, I think it's pretty clear that they were giving the 2 of us a message. Stay out of the old section. We don't want you here. I think my dad is still trapped in this house and haunting us. For context, there were 7 people living in the house, including me, my husband, our daughter, my mom, my dad, my younger sister, and her fiancé. Just over 3 weeks ago, my dad ended himself in his room while my mom was away for the weekend. I had seen him the night previous around 6 p.m. In the house were me, my husband, our daughter, and my dad. Coming from rooms that face our backyard fire pit area. He loved having bonfires and get-togethers back there. A board game got knocked over that had been sitting in that spot for days undisturbed. It was a game he specifically bought for my daughter on her b-day. The thermostat was turned way down or off. He was notorious for always turning it down, claiming to be too hot when the rest of us were fine or even cold. Objects being missing or not where we last remembered them being. I've had a couple dreams where he was there. My sister has been seeing shadows moving out of the corner of her eye downstairs. But this morning was the worst. I have had issues in the past with dreams where I feel trapped or like I'm awake but can't control anything. Definitely borders on sleep paralysis. This morning I was sleeping on the couch upstairs after dropping my husband off to work. I had my phone playing white noise next to me. I had a hard time falling asleep, and I didn't even realize I had. I could feel myself lying there with my eyes closed. I could hear the white noise. Then I suddenly heard his voice clear as day. Hey! Hey, my nickname. I remember feeling paralyzed and terrified, like I couldn't breathe. I tried to ignore it and hope it would go away. Then he started talking more, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, "Are you going to help me? I need help with something. Can you come here?" I felt myself get up, and I stumbled toward the room, but I couldn't really open my eyes. It felt like every time I tried to, they would close immediately. When I got to the bedroom, I saw a flash of him, and he was trying to play fight with me like we used to do. He was talking, but I could barely hear him. Then he ran past me down the stairs into the basement in blackness, saying something about going to get my girls. And he laughed. Then I woke up suddenly on the couch. There's been this weird heavy feeling in the house now. My nerves are fried, and I think I'm about to spend the day saging the whole house. 3 people saw ghosts behind me. Am I haunted? When I was 17, about 5 or 6 years ago, something strange happened during a video chat with a girl I had been talking to. Out of nowhere, she told me she could see a man standing behind me. Sometimes he was there, and other times he wasn't, but every time she mentioned him, she looked deadly serious. I didn't see anything, so I brushed it off, thinking she was joking. Still, the way she described him unnerved me. Eventually, I stopped talking to her, and the incident faded from my mind. A couple of years later, I was on another video chat with a different girl. This time, I didn't mention anything about the first girl's experience. Why would I? But during one of our conversations, she suddenly asked me, "Who's the man standing behind you?" I was really surprised. I turned to check, but as before, there was nobody there. When I told her that she wasn't the first person to see this mysterious man, she said she often sees ghosts. With time, we parted ways, and I stopped talking to this girl. For a long time after that, nothing unusual happened. I lived a normal, quiet life, and the thought of those eerie video chats became less of a concern. But then, just recently, I started talking to another woman over video chat. She didn't know anything about the previous incidents. Yet during one of our conversations, she told me she saw a blurry figure behind me. This time, it wasn't a man, it was a woman, just standing there, smiling. Her face wasn't clear, and before I could ask much more, she said the figure disappeared. I'm confused and scared. What does all of this mean? It's been years, and while nothing terrible has happened in my life, I can't shake the unease this brings. Now I can't help but wonder who or what has been silently watching me all this time. Perhaps it is an angel, but keep in mind that I am not a religious person. However, I do believe in the existence of ghosts and demons. Should I be worried? Maybe someone has experienced something similar? I think my friend's house is haunted by 2 ghosts. I have these 2 friends that live in the same house. They're cousins and live in a house that's an apartment with 2 floors, A and B. Floor A is upstairs, as you probably thought, and floor B is downstairs, so I'll call her Emma, female, 25, and him Daniel, male, 24. Emma lives in part B, and she normally works or goes up to part A because she said she doesn't feel comfortable downstairs. She has a little sibling and her dad living with her. Her little sister keeps talking about a man called the Strange Man who is around 5 feet 9 inches 5'11", and he has blue skin. She's only 3, so she doesn't really look at it when she sees him because she said he scares her, which is understandable for a little kid. Emma has experienced both the sound of a male voice and the movement of objects when she is alone. Daniel's family lived in the downstairs apartment for a while, and the little siblings have said they don't like the man in the house. That's only the first one. The second is a little girl that comes out of the boiler room. They said she has been seen to wear a light pink dress/nightgown, has brown hair, and they never saw her eyes. The kids told Emma they would play with her, and Daniel would try to go see the little girl the kids were playing with and never saw her. Emma and Daniel have been more and more upset about it because the ghosts have been moving all their stuff around, and they are trying to move. Any ideas to help them feel more comfortable in their house before they move? The house I live in was haunted, true story. This is by far the spookiest experience my family and I have had regarding the paranormal. I am currently living in Australia, and this all started when I moved into my current house around 3 years ago. In my culture, we believe that whenever a family moves into a new home, a priest should come to perform various prayers to bless the house. However, when my mum bought the house, we immediately went on holiday for 3 months, so we were unable to perform the rituals. Everything started when we first came back to our house. Just some background. My mum raised me on her own, so it was just the 2 of us staying in the house at the time. I was still in high school, and my mum worked in the city, so we both took the train every morning. My mum always left home earlier than me, so it was my job to lock up every morning. My mom worked late almost every day, so I would get home first and be home alone for at least 5 hours every day. One morning as I left home, I began to feel paranoid that I had not locked the door, so I walked back to check it. The door was locked. Later that day when I came home from school, I walked up my driveway to find that the door was wide open. I freaked out, but I was brave enough to go inside. Our kitchen is pretty close to the entrance, so I grabbed a knife and searched the entire house. There was no one there. I decided not to tell my mom because she was really stressed with work, and I did not want her to freak out. Over the next few days, another strange thing started happening. Our garage door would start randomly opening whenever we were home. My mom was kind of scared, but then we thought maybe our neighbor's garage remote functioned at the same frequency or something, and it was activating our door too. So, we dismissed it. It had been about 2 months since we were living in our new house, and everything seemed to be normal again. Until one day when I was awoken in the middle of the night by my mom. She looked awful and asked me if I had come to her room to wake her up. I said no, I was half asleep and had no idea what she was rambling on about. She didn't believe me and made me swear that I hadn't. I always play scare pranks on my family, so that was why. I swore I didn't and asked her what was up. My mom is a super light sleeper, and so while she was sleeping, she heard someone prop her door open. She looked up and saw the figure of a boy and thought it was me. She asked it what was wrong and blinked. There was nothing there, and her door was still open. She called my name a few times, and there was no response, hence why she came to my room. I have to admit, given the stuff happening with the doors, I was kinda scared, but I convinced my mom that she was imagining things, and she went back to sleep. Ever since that night, up to this day, my mom still sleeps with her door open and the living room light on, and I do not blame her after what happened next. 2 weeks after this incident occurred, my mom's best friend and her son and daughter, they were both around my age, came over from our homeland, Malaysia, to visit us. I was really excited, as I have always been close to them. One thing you should know about my aunt, she's had many experiences growing up with the paranormal, and so she is super scared of ghosts. For this reason, I and her kids always used to play pranks on her. One day the 4 of us were playing poker on the dining table while my mom was taking a nap in the living room. Suddenly my mom rushes out of the living room, her eyes are wide open, and she looks really scared. She asked her who had woken her up from her nap. The 4 of us were dumbfounded as we had been playing cards the entire time. She then told us that she felt someone tap her shoulder while she was asleep. When she opened her eyes, there were 2 feet on the floor. Once again, she blinked, and the feet were gone, and there was no one there. My mom was full on freaking out now, especially after what happened the other night. Then my aunt, given how afraid she is of ghosts, started to freak out too. I didn't want her holiday to be ruined, so I managed to convince them that my mom was probably in the middle of a dream, so when she woke up, she was likely hallucinating. Yes, I know it sounds stupid, but hey, it worked. But then the next day, something else happened. My mom had gone to the shops to get groceries. The kids and I were playing video games in the living room while their mom was having a shower. Suddenly we hear the bathroom door burst open, and out runs my aunt wrapped in her towel. She screamed at us, telling us to stop trying to scare us and that it wasn't funny. The 3 of us were super confused, and her daughter asked her what had happened. She told us that she knew that we were the ones knocking on the bathroom door even after she told us to stop 3 times. I know it probably seems like she was overreacting, but I cannot emphasize how scared she is of ghosts. I exchanged a concerned look with her kids and then told her that it genuinely was not us and that we were playing FIFA, the best game ever, the entire time. Soon my mom got home, and we told her what happened. Let's just say that my aunt started sleeping with her room lights on for the rest of her trip. Soon my aunt and her kids had gone home, and it was back to me and my mom again. We were back to our regular routine. My mom was finally at peace, and she had not seen anything for a while, apart from the garage door opening on its own every once in a while. The same, however, could not be said for me. It seemed that it had come my turn to be tormented. As I mentioned before, with my mom at work, I would be home alone for a few hours every day. I began to start hearing things. The strange thing is it would never occur while I was in the living room. Whenever I went to use the toilet or went to sit in my room, I would start hearing things coming from the living room and kitchen. It started out small. Just the sound of some panting, like if you had run a marathon. That kind of panting. But the minute I entered the living room, nothing. There would be no sound at all. It soon started to get worse. I would hear footsteps pacing around outside my room and spoons and pots falling in the kitchen. But every time I stepped out into the living room, the noises would stop, and everything would be just as I left it. There was even a time when I thought I heard a kid laughing right outside the door when I was in the toilet. I decided not to tell my mom yet because she seemed to be getting over her experiences, and I did not want to scare her again. But one day I felt that I needed to tell her, and we decided that day it was time we contacted our priest to perform the prayers for our house. It was the day my best friend and his parents came over for dinner. It all started as an innocent dinner. My best friend and his family were Malaysian too, and we were having a wonderful time talking about home while having a signature Malaysian meal. My friend's dad was telling us a story when all of a sudden, his face just froze, and his eyes widened. He honestly looked like he was having a stroke. His face contorted into a frown, and he just stared down at the table. My mom and I shared a worrying look, but my friend and his mom just continued eating like nothing was happening. Suddenly his dad seemed to return to us, and he continued telling the story as if nothing happened. But he could see that my mom and I looked worried. Suddenly his wife tapped his shoulder and said, "Just tell them." He frowned at his wife and just kept eating. There was an awkward silence for a few minutes, and then he finally decided to address the elephant in the room. He apologized for scaring us and assured us that there was no need to worry. He then went on to tell us about his life. Since he was a child, he had been very religious, and from a young age, he felt a very close connection to God. He regularly meditated and was very, very spiritual. He was so spiritual that when he was in his mid-20s, he had awoken a gift. He was able to see dead people. I kid you not, when he said this, I immediately looked at my friend waiting for him to start laughing at some prank. But my friend's face was dead serious, and he continued looking at his dad as he told his story. He told us that he could see them everywhere, when he was walking his dog on the street, when he was sitting in the park, in people's houses, and even sometimes sitting on people who had been possessed. He said the spirits were drawn to him because they knew he could see them, and they would stalk him, begging him to help them reach the afterlife. He said there was simply nothing he could do because these people had died before their time and that they would simply have to wait on earth until it was their time. Back home, he was regularly contacted by people having paranormal experiences to perform a cleansing to drive evil spirits away. He told us about some of those experiences, but I do not feel like it is my place to share them here. He then asked us something that gave me chills. Have you guys performed prayers for your house yet? My mom refused to answer the question until he told her why he had asked that. He said that he did not want to worry us and that if we hadn't, we probably should. My mom continued to ask him why until he finally conceded. This is what he said: "Remember when I had that moment just now while I was talking? I had a visit. I won't tell you what it was, but it was the same spirit I saw standing at the front door when we came here." That's when my mom told him everything that had been happening. It is during this time that I decided to tell my mom about the things I had been hearing in the house. My friend's dad then told us that he did not think it was a malicious spirit, but to be safe it was time for us to conduct the prayers for the house. Before he left, he asked my mom if he could see our altar in the prayer room. My mom took him to it, and we all followed him. As he stood in front of the altar, his body suddenly shook, as if he just had a huge hiccup. He then put his hands together and bowed his head. Before leaving, he said, "I can see why the two of you have not been hurt, you are both protected." That concluded their visit. A week later we arranged for a priest from our local temple to cleanse and bless our home. I promise you that ever since that day, nothing strange has ever happened in our house. Even the garage door has stopped opening on its own. I am not a particularly religious person, but I have learned my lesson. I will never move into a new house without performing the rituals that my culture demands. I think there's a demon in my house. I want to start by saying that the paranormal has always gravitated toward me specifically. Even my mom thinks I have spirits following me around and have since I was a little girl. She says she's seen and felt them in every bedroom I've had. I'm a firm believer in God, and I don't know if that's relevant, but I do think some people are just more susceptible to spiritual and demonic activity, no matter how devout of a Christian they are. It might seem like I'm crazy, and maybe I am. I just want clarity, and I want to know if these things seem as sinister to all of you as they do to me. My boyfriend and I have been together for a year. I started hanging out around his house 9 months ago and moved in officially 4 months ago. He says that before I started hanging around, stuff didn't happen that often, and when it did, he would ignore it. Apparently it would just be small stuff like fleeting shadows in the hallway. Since I've moved in, it's picked up. It started out with more frequent shadows in the corners of our eyes and progressed to things moving on their own. One day he was in the bathroom, and a towel flew off of the shower rack at him. There are no windows or vents in there. It had to have been physically pushed. Then, we started hearing each other's voices. I would hear him whistling when he wasn't home, and he would hear me talking when I wasn't home. It didn't take long to start hearing each other even when we were home. He was sitting right next to me and said something to me, and I asked him to repeat it only to find out he didn't speak at all. This kind of thing happens almost every day. I started doing some research and watched an episode of the show Haunted on Netflix about mimicking demons. From what I've learned, only demonic entities can become powerful enough to mimic you, and it gets worse as they get stronger. Online it said that if it gets strong enough, it can physically appear as you to another person. I think it already looks like me. Our cat was in the hallway one day, and it nuzzled the air as if it was a hand. Our other cat meows at corners. The other night, I heard my voice say something in the living room, and the dog went running towards it and started running around and playing as if I was in there with it. Additionally, my boyfriend told me he saw me in the kitchen while I was in the bedroom. Only for a split second, but he was sure he saw it, and he was sure it was me. Weird things always happen when I shower, especially when I'm home alone. I'll hear the front door open and footsteps walking toward the bathroom, then get out to find the front door locked and the house empty. A couple of weeks ago I was showering and my boyfriend was in the living room waiting for me to get out. It's not uncommon for him to come in the bathroom while I'm showering to annoy me, so I wasn't shocked when I heard him walk up to the shower curtain. He called my name from right on the other side of the curtain in a really strange, sing-song tone. I peeked out to see what he wanted, and he wasn't there, and the door was still locked. When confronted about it, he promised it wasn't him. Not to mention both of us constantly feel like we're being watched and like something dark and heavy is looming over us. Especially when we're sleeping. I can't even sleep in the house alone, and the only room I feel safe in is the living room. We hear footsteps a lot too. It's almost like we can hear it every time it walks. I feel extremely targeted by this thing, whatever it is. It seems to mimic me and bother me the most, and I keep waking up with huge bruises all over me. I've never been the type to do that before, and it only happens when I sleep there. My boyfriend thinks it's nothing and I'm just sleeping rough, but that's not the case, and I know it. Beds don't give you bruises. It reminds me of the Conjuring movie, where the demon wants to possess the mom and leaves bruises on her to weaken and wear her down. I genuinely don't know what to do at this point. The air there is dark and heavy, and I'm terrified that bruises are going to turn into scratches and scratches are going to turn into full-on attacks. I keep my Bible close and pray as much as I can. I've even thought about inviting a pastor over to cleanse the house. I've also thought of putting baby powder on the floor like they did in Paranormal Activity to try and catch whatever it is. Something in the lake tried to lure me in. This happened a few years ago, back when I was 13. Every summer since I was 7, I'd go up to this sleepaway camp up in the Canadian Shield, around the Georgian Bay area, for 2 weeks. There, I would spend a week and a half on the island, then 3 days on an out trip, which was basically canoeing to 2 different campsites in the bay and actually camping on those sites with tents and stuff instead of sleeping in cabins. I should also mention that the lake and islands that the camp was built on were originally waterways the Aboriginal peoples used when canoeing to get from place to place, and then also a big place for trading when the colonizers came. Thus, there is a startling amount of shipwrecks and ghost stories in the area. There's one in particular that I'll bring up in the actual story because I feel like it's important. That's all the backstory I can think of giving at the moment, so I'll get into the story now. A few summers back, I went up to this camp, like normal.
I got the top bunk in the cabin, met my cabin mates, A, D, B, C, K, Camper K, and my counselors, E and SK, Staff K. The out trip would be the following morning because of scheduling, and thus after getting up at 7 a.m., we set out at 8. We took 3 canoes, with the counselors sterning 2 and a more confident camper sterning the 3rd. I was not sterning, as I sucked at it, I still do. We paddled for 4 to 5 hours down the channels, and it was all fairly normal right up until we reached the first campsite. The first campsite was on a bare, rock-covered point, and setting up the tents and splitting off into groups for said tents was fairly easy. The counselors had their own tent and were also setting up the camping stoves because they didn't trust us with them. After that was finished, we went swimming. This is where the first weird thing happened. I brought goggles, and because nobody else did, they all wanted to have a go at using them to look under the water. A was the most insistent, so I gave them the goggles to get them to leave me alone and decided to look for crayfish. The counselors are supervising all of this and can see it happening. Not even 5 minutes later, a suddenly resurfaces by the dock, screaming and flailing and freaking out. They book it back to shore, and the rest of us get called in. We're all wondering what the hell happened to make A so worried like that, and A swears up and down they saw somebody else swimming under the dock with them, even when it was only us on the campsite. Worry turns into exasperation, and none of us take A seriously because we all think they're trying to mess with us. E even takes the goggles and goes to look under the docks, and wouldn't you know, nothing is under there. After that, I just storms off back to the tents, and we pack up and have dinner. Day 2 happens, and overnight rain decides to show up and be awful, and when we go to get breakfast ready, we discover that all of our food barrels,
which we placed by the water, have been open and dug into, with a few food items bobbing around in the water. In a similar vein, some of Dee's stuff that was placed by the food barrels was also in the water, which she had to swim for. Even then, some stuff was still missing. This was confusing, as the barrels were bear and raccoon proof and were closed with a ring connecting the lid and barrel to each other. We just sort of decided that somebody didn't close it properly and ate our soggy breakfast in misery. We get back into the canoes after packing up all our stuff and begin to paddle. While I was paddling, I swear that I heard scratching sounds on the bottom of the canoe as we got closer to the lake we were staying at for the night. However, it was also raining hard during this time, so I might have been fooling myself. The campsite we need to get to is impossible to canoe to, so we needed to portage. To be funny or just to freak us out after yesterday's events, SK decides to point out a Mary statue on the opposite shore and tell us the story behind it. It's been a few years, so I don't remember all the details, but it essentially goes like this. A mother brings her daughter and son on a canoeing trip up to this lake to go camping. Unfortunately, both of them end up drowning when she isn't looking. In her grief, the mother then builds the Mary statue, which is creepy as by the way, on the hill to remember them, before ultimately drowning herself. We were all, reasonably, freaked out by the story, being 13 and all. We're still talking about it even when we finish the portage and get to the campsite on the lake, where we set up the tents and have dinner. When Dee is washing dishes, however, she slips and falls in. This part of the lake is shallow, but Dee seems to be freaking out and struggling to get her leg out of the water, all the while she's screaming that something has grabbed her. We pulled her up with minimal resistance, and Dee is super freaked out, repeating over and over again that something human grabbed her by the ankle. We don't tease her like we did because she seems legitimately freaked out, she was crying and hyperventilating, and we also decide to not go swimming after that. When we settle down for the night, I'm in a tent closer to the lake than the others.
I forget who I roomed with, but I was with A and D, I think.
I had a tendency to wake up in the middle of the night at random, and this was no different. I wake up and sort of lie there for a moment. I didn't dream this part. I would have known if I had, but I was fully awake when this happened. Somebody starts calling me from the lake. I remember it so clearly. The voice was beautiful, I've never heard anything like it. It was feminine but deeper and sounded like honey. It was sort of motherly in a way. It said, "Come into the water. Come for a swim. You love to swim, don't you? Come join us in the water." And it was so beautiful and alluring that I wanted to.
For a brief second, I wanted to go into the water, to swim in that lake with whatever was calling me into it.
I still do, to this day. There's something calling me back to that lake, even now, when I'm miles away from it and in my room, something inside me wants to go swim in that lake. Fortunately for me, I was exhausted from paddling in the canoe in the rain that I just went back to sleep. I'm not kidding. I was so exhausted I didn't go swimming in that lake that night. I didn't obey what the hypnotic, beautiful voice was telling me to do, go join it and the others, all because I was tired. Nothing else really happened that summer. I didn't tell anyone about what happened that night, because it seemed sacred, and they wouldn't believe me anyway. I don't really know what tried to lure me into the lake, but I feel like it was the same thing that A saw and what grabbed D. There's also probably a good chance it had something to do with the Mary statue story, maybe the mother or something? I don't exactly know, and I don't really want to go back to the lake again, because I'm not sure I'll be able to resist that call once more. If anyone has any ideas about what it was, that would be great. Thanks so much. Native American haunting. We owned a vacation home in Central Florida for several years. It was on a sizable lake and was surrounded by, but not connected to, many other lakes. A couple hundred years ago the water levels were higher, so they all connected. It made sense that there would be Native American settlements in the area. Turns out that there was a fairly large village that included our property. It was likely the Potano tribe. When the Spanish arrived in FL, this is one of the villages ravaged by disease. My son found several arrowheads and a Spanish trading bead on site. We had many strange experiences that defy explanation. We'd hear people talking in the garage, items would fly off shelves when no one was near. A few people, who knew nothing about the history of the house, swore they saw what looked like the face of a man. The weirdest was a small patch of water that would be on the middle of the bedroom floor. It was about the size and shape of an adult foot, and it didn't spread. There was also no source where water would just come up from under the floor. There is no way someone could have walked in with wet feet and left just that one spot. The place did have a vibe to it, not negative, but charged. The Woman in Black. Ever since I was little, I was always intrigued by the paranormal, more so for the unknown factors surrounding that world. Nothing had ever happened to me personally until my family and I moved into a new house in what was called the bungalow district of my hometown. All of the houses on this block were original houses built by the people that originally settled on this land in the late 1800s and early 1900s, carriage houses and all, although my dad turned his carriage house into a studio for work. Although I was intrigued by the paranormal world, it was something that seemed to only happen in movies. Obviously, a piece of me knew this wasn't the case, but I had no personal experiences to make me think otherwise. I remember the day my dad showed me around, although the house was very quaint and probably didn't need a tour guide. The house was filled with construction workers, who were working on getting it ready for us to officially move in. Before we got to the basement, a worker stopped my dad for assistance, and my dad sent me off to explore by myself. Something drew me towards the basement. The basement door was situated on the outside of the house and under the balcony. The door was ominously old-looking, chips and warps in the wood covered the surface. I reached towards the latch and pulled the door open. Empty. All that was inside were mounds of dirt, and the piles got higher to the ceiling the further back you went. I walked as far back as I could go without being too cramped or hitting my head. I stopped and listened to the faint footsteps above my head, and then I felt it. The feeling of being watched. This is only in movies, I told myself to calm me down, but no part of me could move as I was frozen in fear. As quickly as the feeling came on, I beelined out of the basement and latched the door behind me. That night as I was falling asleep, I noticed a silhouette standing on the landing of the stairs outside my bedroom window. It was a humanoid shape, but again I convinced myself it was nothing, probably just the streetlight casting an interesting shadow I'm not used to. And turned to fall asleep. I awoke and checked my phone for the time, 3:15 a.m. I glanced at the window, and the silhouette was still there, yup, just a shadow from something out on the street. But then it turned and descended down the stairs. Terror filled my veins. Someone or something was looking into my window and watching me sleep for hours. Needless to say, I didn't sleep the rest of that night. This was the only time, however, that I personally saw what was in my house, but it wasn't done making its presence known. For many nights, week after week, I kept hearing footsteps throughout the house or papers being shuffled as if my dad was up late doing work, but when I opened the bedroom door, the house was dark. Finally, one day I asked my dad if he was noticing anything weird and told him a few of my incidents, and he replied with, "You watch too many horror movies," and brushed me off. From time to time, I would share something I experienced, and time again it was shot down with, "It's all in your head." One night, we were sitting around an above-ground campfire that my dad had outside in the backyard, and my dad was strangely quiet. "Do you believe in evil?" he asked. "Do you know that the light we have inside us is strong enough to ward any evil off? Think of a pitch-black room. What happens if you open a door to a room that's filled with light? The light floods the room and washes the darkness away." I asked him why he was talking about this stuff, to which he responded, "Every night around 3 a.m. I feel like I am being watched. Whatever it is, it doesn't feel pleasant, and I try to envision a white light emanating from my being and make it known that evil is not welcome." Apparently, my dad had been experiencing something but tried to avoid telling me to not scare me more. After that conversation, the events grew more frequent, and something else was noticed. Any noise that we heard around the house came in threes. For example, if a doorknob was jiggled, it would go jiggle, 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 or if it was footsteps, step, 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 and even knocking would come in clumps of 3. If you think that occurrence sounds familiar, it's because in the paranormal world, 3 can be considered a mock to the Holy Trinity. Whatever this was, it was not friendly like we might have previously thought. One night I was out of town with my mom and sister. I got a call from my dad around 3 a.m., which, being a teenager, of course I was awake, so I answered. "Hey, did you by chance come home for some reason just now?" "No, why? It sounds like someone is running around the house." "Inside or outside?" First it was outside. I woke up to the sound of heavy boots coming up the balcony stairs and slowly walking towards my bedroom window, then back to the French doors and into the house. "Did you leave the French doors open?" "No, I'm sure they were locked." He paused. "The noises stopped outside my room. I'm opening the door." As usual, nothing was there that my dad could see, but at that moment, my dad couldn't even muster up the light we all have inside us that he had talked about a while back. Some more time passed, with events getting a little more strange, such as interesting prints on the walls and ceiling above my dad's bed, almost like a 3-fingered handprint, but the fingers were stretched in an unhuman-like manner. With how crazy it sounded, I avoided it at all costs. Telling friends about these events. Not only was I scared about how my friends would think of me, who knows if anyone would ever want to come over to spend time anymore. One summer night, My friend and I were staying up late watching different Blockbuster movies. Yes, this was before Blockbuster went out of business, in my dad's studio, aka the carriage house. My friend needed a cigarette break, so we headed outside to chat and whatnot. I don't think I have to mention that it was around 3 a.m. at this point. "Who's that lady?" my friend asked. "Excuse me?" "The lady walking up the balcony stairs. She's wearing all black and..." He fell silent for a moment. "Every night at 3 a.m., she walks up from the basement to your dad's room and watches him sleep, but if your sister is here, she watches her. During the day, she is in the far left corner of the basement." Like I mentioned before, I was hesitant to tell friends about this, so the fact that he knew this stuff was eye-opening because for so long my friend told me that he has a sixth sense, which again I lumped together with things that happened in movies, till now. The moment my dad woke up, I told him what my friend said and that we need to do something before we can't control whatever it is. He agreed. My stepmom is very spiritual, so he reached out to her and asked if one of her friends could come bless the house, but shared nothing of what we knew or what we had experienced. The friend of my stepmom went into our house blindly but still confirmed everything we experienced. The craziest connection came when she got to the far left corner of the basement, where she said the energy was the strongest. Blessed objects were placed throughout the house to keep anything unwanted away. For months those objects sat in the same places, till one day I noticed they weren't, and I just figured my dad cleaned them up and put them away since we had had no experiences since the blessing. About a week went by before I asked my dad about the objects, and he responded, "I thought you had removed them." Clearly whatever this was, it wasn't ready to be done with us or the house. Just as quickly as the incidents had gone away, they started right back up again, although this time the energy felt lighter. My dad and I didn't feel scared per se. Things would happen to me, and instead of being terrified, I would run out in excitement to tell my dad or anyone who was around what had happened. The coolest thing that happened to me was when I was lying in my bed, facing the wall, and I felt my pillow being pressed on. Thinking it was my sister messing with me, I flipped around to yell at her as older siblings do, only to be faced with an empty room. When I looked at my memory foam pillow, a handprint was visible and slowly disappeared. I don't know why I found this so cool, maybe because for the first time I didn't feel threatened by this action, but almost comforted. Nonetheless, my dad wanted this to be our house and our house only. So, he reached out again to the friend of my stepmom, and she agreed to do a form of spiritual therapy, which in return taught us about a little history of the house. Before the bungalow was there, the land belonged to the Chumash Indians, and as people began to settle on the lands, the few Chumash still around retreated to the mountain range above the town. A few did stay near the settlers, one lady in particular, whom the settlers called Jane. Jane was a lovely woman who loved the land and taught many of the new people how to use the land to their advantage, and in return, she was able to live in one of the bungalows that were built. While the quaint bungalow was shared with another man, Jane was very happy with her new life. But things quickly changed for her because she felt that the settlers were destroying the land she held so near and dear to her heart, her family heritage. At some point the man hurt Jane and impregnated her with her first and only child. Although the child was not from a happy or good memory, she loved the little girl like no other. As time went on, Jane got more and more angry and made her feelings known, but it didn't seem to faze the other people around the town. One day, she hit her breaking point when the man allowing her to live in his home kicked her out, keeping their kid in the process, and his excuse was because she was not contributing to anything around the house, the new town, or the land. Feeling exiled from her home and her land, she acted on her blind anger. That night she went to the far left corner of the basement and grabbed an axe, making her way up to the house and slaughtering the man and their little girl before taking her own life as well. This all took place in the room that was now my dad's. While Jane was pushed to this point, the evilness in her actions stained the energy of the house, leaving behind something dark. The energy worker helped bring a tribe chief forward from the light to help Jane be guided back with her people, at least, so she claimed. About a year went by with nothing happening. In that year, I moved to a new town for school and work by myself, and at some point, I started realizing that sometimes I'd sense a presence I couldn't physically see, nothing terrifying, but definitely noticeable. I still never really talked about these happenings in my life because the fact of the matter is some people don't like hearing stories like this, or others just don't believe. One night, another year had passed since moving, and I had met this amazing man that now lived with me. About a week after he moved in, just as we were laying down in bed to go to sleep, he asked, "Who's that lady standing next to you? She looks angry. What is she wearing?" "Black, all black." I got stiff, and at that moment I lied that I didn't know what he was talking about, even though I had a feeling. The next day I told him about the woman in black, aka Jane, who tormented my dad's house for a time, He was shocked at the description I gave, of what I knew of her at least. Because it was exactly what he saw standing next to my bedside. That day we drove over to get supplies to bless the apartment, and on our way back home, a rock flew through my windshield, shattering nearly to pieces. Terrified, I drove faster to get back to the house. Once we got home we began a little ritual. My boyfriend walked towards the kitchen, but I walked towards the bedroom and stopped dead in my tracks, unable to lift my gaze from the closet as if hypnotized in terror, but broke away and headed to join my boyfriend, who was coming around the corner to head to the bedrooms himself. The moment that he glanced over to the closet, he noped it out of there, saying there was a black mass in the closet. Shortly after this, about a week later, I was at work. We had just closed the doors to the last customers, my coworker was cleaning, and I was counting the tills. All of a sudden, a huge bang came from the window behind me, which had a film on it and couldn't be looked out of, and the window in the building shook like no other. When we ran outside, we found a car had driven off the road, and if it weren't for my parked car in the employee parking, he would have driven right through the building, and more than likely killing or really injuring my coworker and me, who were just on the other side of the window. Since then, I have learned that those incidents, a few weren't listed as not enough space, were apparently intended to harm me in some way, according to certain professionals in the field of paranormal. Nothing really new has happened other than the occasional feeling of being watched, but this experience has definitely opened my eyes to the other side of life. I think my house is haunted. What do I do? My family and I have lived in this house for over 7 years now, but I was relatively young, 7-8-ish, when we moved in, and I've always had a negative feeling about it. We live rurally, and there isn't another house for at least a kilometer in all directions. The house is at the base of a small mountain range, and as I understand it, it is built on land that has seen a lot of trauma. It's very near Parihaka, if you know the history. The house was built in the 1930s for the purpose of housing the people building the road and their families. All previous owners are listed on the deed to the house, and I did some research, and apparently the original owners were genuinely buried in the garden, so that's fine. Anyway, for the majority of the time that we have lived here, I've shared a bedroom with my little sister, and at night, when she isn't home, sometimes I hear whispers. Clear words coming from her bed, but she isn't there. It freaked me out loads when we first moved, but now I just try to ignore them. I hear ticking in the wall beside my bed. Sometimes I'll wake up to knocking sounds from the closet at the foot of my bed. Recently I was home alone, and I heard as clear as day footsteps pacing the hallway. I cannot make this up. Usually when I'm home alone there will be thumps, but there have never been footsteps like this. Apart from that stuff, the house is just really weird in general. We did renovations a little while back, and I remember the whole energy just changed. We knocked out the original chimney and found the burner oven thing in the wall behind it, which was fine, I guess, but then we discovered 3 dead rats, side by side, in the concrete slab below the fireplace. In the concrete, like it was poured around them. We had to open up the roof at one point because of the possibility of asbestos. When we did, we found a live bird in the roof. There are no openings, even the old chimney doesn't have holes of any sort that a bird would have been able to get through. The most recent owner was kind of weird too. Super old guy who has lived there for at least 50 years and left all of his stuff behind. I'm not joking, he came to look at the open home of our old house and asked if we wanted to look at his house. There was no showing, and then we had to deal with all his stuff. When we came to see it, he told us he slept in the master bedroom, which had at least 3 beds in it, and kept his books in the guest room, which had at least 5 beds in it. You know, we asked, do you have people come to stay? Grandchildren or nieces and nephews or something? To which he said, I haven't had visitors in 20 years. Old people freak me out. Sorry. Anyway, I'm writing this at 2:19 a.m. Sometimes I see shadow figures in the corner of my eye, and sometimes they aren't just in the corner of my eye. Sometimes I see people in my house, clear as day, with skin and everything, and I'll ask my parents later on, who was that who came to visit? And they look at me like I'm crazy and say that no one came. What do I do about this? It latched onto him, true story. The story that I'm about to tell is a true story that happened to a very close friend of mine back in 2014. This incident took place in the southern part of India, and let's name my friend Johnny so no identity is revealed. Background: Johnny was an aspiring musician. He had an amazing voice and was always composing new music and making short music albums. He decided to take his music career more seriously and wanted to open up his own recording studio, because renting recording studios in the city was quite expensive back then. Story: he rented out a 2-bedroom house and made one bedroom into his personal space and the other one his workspace. He spent most of the day staying home and making music because that's his full-time job now. That's when strange things started happening. One morning when he woke up, he saw strands of long female hair on the side of his bed, to which he didn't pay much attention and went back to work. He woke up the next morning again to find strands of long female hair, but this time they were on the top of his chest. He started to freak out a little but still didn't want to let it affect his work. That's when things went downhill. There were days when he woke up to find his shorts removed, when he clearly remembered wearing them while sleeping. He started to notice nail scratches on his body. Note, he didn't have a girlfriend, and none of his friends ever slept over. Sometimes he woke to this burning sensation on his private parts, pervert ghost. He also had this strange feeling like someone was with him while he was in the studio. He started drinking and smoking. He didn't want to work on any music anymore and ended up staying home by himself all day, every day. He wouldn't let anyone come visit him. Wouldn't talk to anyone. Stopped visiting his family. All he did was stay home drinking, smoking, and sleeping. It latched onto him. One day I confronted him as I was worried about his well-being, and after a lot of pressure, he decided to tell me what was going on. He began telling me about the woman's hair, nail scratches, feeling of being watched, and fear of leaving the house. But something he told after that freaked the hell out of me, and that's when I decided he needed serious help. Johnny said, "I actually enjoy whatever this spirit was doing to me. I feel loved and special, and I don't want to leave this house ever." I made calls to his mother and a pastor who is also a family friend. These people lived in a different city and came down to help him. When they saw Johnny, he was all smelly, his beard grown, and he looked like a complete mess. The mother obviously starts crying and begs him to leave, and he starts to get furious and says he doesn't want to. The pastor sat down with Johnny, prayed with him, and in a friendly way convinced him that it's about time, and he has to leave the house, and that's the only way this thing can latch off of him. Guess what he finally did after all the crying, screaming, and hysterical episodes? We promptly packed up his belongings and relocated to a different city. Background of the house: after we left, Johnny and I got curious about what happened to him in that house, so we started to dig into its past and reached out to the realtor who got him the house. The dude obviously said he didn't know anything, but after bribing him with some money, he spilt the beans. So the landlord of the house was a very superstitious man and believed in voodoo and black magic. When he built that house, he was told that if he sacrificed a young woman on that land, he would become even more wealthy. Let me tell you, India is a superstitious country, and some uneducated people still believe in this crap. They found a poor young girl, about 18 years old, from a backward village, and bought her there and sacrificed her. Note, this was a very long time ago. No wonder the young spirit latched on to Johnny, because she was tortured in that place and was waiting for someone to move in so she could feel alive. Haunted by a demon for 15 years. So it all started when my brother, my father, and I moved into a house. It was a 3-story house with 2 apartments on each floor. The house was over 100 years old but well renovated, and right across the street was my new school, and we were surrounded by a lovely park. All in all, an amazing place to grow up. I was 5, maybe 6, years old at the time. Back then I noticed a lot of shadows in the corners of my eyes. This went on for 10 years without me realizing that it is in fact not a normal eye thing. When I was young, I was extremely afraid of the dark, and for some reason, I always thought Batman was going to stand there when I opened my eyes and kill me. Thinking back, Batman was a very tall black figure, which is going to be important later on. I've always been extremely sensitive to the energies around me and the paranormal, so my guess is that I already sensed his presence but didn't know what it was yet. I was also dealing with depression and insomnia ever since I was very young due to bad family stuff, but that is also relevant. When I got older, about 12, my mental issues started to worsen drastically, and I started to cut myself and stuff like that. My insomnia was pretty bad, and after I was finished with high school at 15, my sleep cycle was ducked beyond repair, so I was usually awake at night and slept during the day, or often not at all. I was constantly sleep deprived. Weird stuff started to happen. Objects would disappear and reappear after months, stuff would randomly fall off shelves and harmless stuff like that, but I noticed it, and it was odd. I started hearing voices yelling or whispering my name. It was the voices of my dad or brother, most of the time only to realize they weren't home or asleep. It got worse pretty fast. It was a long time ago, and I can't remember in what order things happened, but there were multiple auditory things going on. Gurgling like someone was being choked to death from the middle of our living room. Strange music awakening me at night coming from the corner of my room to then get more silent and disappear again. Knocking on the walls, always 3 times, horrible demonic screeches, footsteps, mainly coming from the attic, which was right above our apartment. Sometimes it sounded like someone was throwing around whole closets up there, really loud rumbling in the middle of the night. By that time I already knew my house was haunted, but I didn't know what it was yet, so I and my neighbor and friend Natasha, who was my age, and we grew up together, she also had an older brother that was my brother's age, called Peter, started to investigate. We realized that she and her brother had been bothered by the entity before I had, and they had a guest room that was mainly where it stayed at first. Ever since I lived there, I could not enter the room because the presence was so overwhelmingly evil, almost like the air was crushing you. That same feeling I got after it started and had it 24/7 for about a year. That feeling as if someone is standing right behind you holding a knife at your back, very, very uneasy. I'm sure some of you know the feeling. So I tried to communicate with it and gave it lots of attention, thinking it was a ghost, which was my biggest mistake. Things got a lot worse very quickly, and it had completely attached to me because I was the perfect victim and a buffet of negative emotions, which I later learned was their main energy source to make them stronger. So that one night I looked at the shadow in the corner of my eye and saw a black silhouette of a cat jump off my bed and disappear midair, or rather evaporate like smoke. I jumped around because I sensed someone standing behind me, and there it was in full form. It was what many people call shadow people or hat man. I'm sure there are other terms, but I later learned that these shadowy figures are demons, and they can appear in various forms, often with glowing eyes or a hat. Mine was blank, no face, no hands or feet, not even a real head, but it was about 2 meters tall and filled up the room with dark, smoky shadow and stared into my soul with its non-existent eyes for a moment. I froze in shock. But as fast as it appeared before me, it disappeared again. After that, things got really bad because I started to really research and knew what I was dealing with. I got obsessed, I didn't sleep, and I didn't eat. This was all I cared about. He started to play mind games after that point, which was probably the peak of his haunting. Due to my depression and suicidal tendencies, I welcomed darkness and wasn't scared of many things. After that night, I almost started to cry when there weren't any cracks, which added to my confusion. One time I talked to it all day, just speaking into the air, but I felt its presence, and hoped it would let me sleep late at night. I remember saying something like, "I gave you attention all day now and would appreciate it if you let me sleep now." The energy in the room suddenly got really aggressive, and I felt something choking me for a few minutes. That was the one and only physical attack I experienced. They generally don't want to physically harm us because it would be counterproductive. They will, however, do it if it helps their grand plan to break us. Basically, I was an exhausted wreck because I spent my nights literally fighting off a demon. I knew I needed help and registered in a paranormal forum. There was a guy who ended up helping me twice. He was magically talented and able to do astral projection and stuff like that. Back then he strongly weakened the demon, and it actually stopped for a few years. Every now and then little things would happen, but nothing that made me worry. He still followed me everywhere and had a strong negative impact on my emotions and overall well-being, so much that he drove me to try and end at the age of 16. There were other reasons that contributed to it, but I strongly believe that he was to blame for the most part. This whole experience was extremely traumatizing, like living in a horror movie. Besides my friends who lived in the house, no one believed me, my dad didn't take me seriously, and my brother knew stuff was going on, but he was scared, so he decided to ignore it and leave me alone with it. There were so many more things that happened, but I can't possibly write them all down here. This post is already long enough. I saw some apparitions over the years or heard weird stuff, but overall it left me alone. I'm not sure if he was waiting for the right time again or if he was too weak. After my end attempt, I went to a clinic and met my future best friend. We started to communicate with the demon over the Ouija board, but there wasn't much useful stuff he said. I learned that they just tell you what you want to hear and that you can basically not believe a single word they say. I developed some kind of ducked up mental connection with him. Well, about 2 years ago he became active again. I went to bed at night, and my BF was already lying there, put out all the lights, and closed my eyes. I opened them again and noticed there was light in the living room. As I looked, the light was turned off again. He waited until I looked. These light plays were what he used to do years ago too, and while this might seem harmless, I knew this was it, it's starting again. I was frightened that my body was shaking violently for hours, and my BF had to comfort me. I contacted my friend that helped me years ago and spent a couple months developing a plan to trap the demon in an object. My friend ended up going behind my back and doing something far more risky, but it worked, and the demon is gone for good. At least I think he is, because the connection is severed, and I don't feel him anymore, but I will know in a few years. A little girl's been haunting my house. The first time something weird happened, I was babysitting my girl, 2, at night. I am a single father, and she slept in my bed. She usually, as kids do, didn't sleep unless I went to bed with her, so it was like 1 to 2 a.m., and we were lying in bed, and I was pretending to be asleep. I had been quiet and still for at least 15 to 25 minutes, but I knew she was awake. She kept moving, and suddenly she started talking, replying more likely. "No, you're crazy. No, you're crazy." So she said this like 10 to 12 times before I started shaking/trembling trying to suppress my laughter. So she felt this and put a hand on my back and said, "Don't cry, Daddy." At this moment I opened my eyes, looked at her, and said, "I'm not crying, I'm laughing." "Who are you talking to?" She pointed to the middle of the empty dark room and said, "The little girl, La Niña." The room was empty and almost pitch black. You could barely see the outlines of the stuff. It's a tiny room, like a prison cell, so obviously I got scared shitless, got up, lit the room, and went to play at the PC with the baby sitting in my lap, eventually asleep, until morning. Eventually, we moved out and came back some years later. At this point, she's 12 to 13. She is shy, quiet, and smart, and she didn't live through her phone. She was as an archaic kid. Bless the heavens, we built a room in the living room, just the one wall we needed, so she could have some privacy. She never wanted to sleep there, and sometimes she didn't even play there. I didn't mind much until one day I got pissed and sent her to play in her room. The answer I got was, "I don't like playing in that room because I feel someone is watching me, and sometimes I even think I see a little girl in the corner of my eye. I didn't pay her much attention at the moment. I just laughed and told her you should be afraid of the living, something of the sort." This other time, we had a fridge box on the balcony, very near the room, and sometimes she used to play in it and even had it arranged like a clubhouse or something like that. So I got home and shouted to see where she was because she didn't come to the door to say hi, and she shouted from the balcony, "Dad, come." When I got there, she got out of the box. All of this was during the day, and she told me she had been trapped in the box for some time, afraid to get out, because she felt a presence outside. She didn't even peek, and she told me straight up she thought it was the little girl. People, I have seen it, standing there in the middle of the room like a washed-up Samara, the girl in the ring. This one has a white dress, long black hair over her face, and is always looking down, like at her feet. She doesn't make eye contact, opposite of another thing I saw, another story, but she is usually facing the door, although I'm pretty sure I've seen her from another angle, almost like her full back. She didn't disappear unless you tried to focus on her. She was not a glimpse. If you just stood there watching from the corner of your eye, she was there. Nor was she a trick of light. She showed up in the dark, and you could clearly see her, and when the lights were on also. I rearranged the stuff in the room, small room, very little stuff, nothing of that height, when I got tired of seeing her. Despite my efforts, I was unable to get rid of her. My daughter, 14, had to migrate to Berlin with her mother, crying face, duck communism, and I dismantled that room. I'm actually halfway there and not advancing, but I had a friend come for a wild rift, a game, sleepover, and one of the first times he came, when he went to the bathroom, that part of the house, he told me he felt like a bad vibe or a presence coming from that area, specifically where the room used to be. My sister-in-law also dropped this in a normal conversation, like a bad vibe or a presence coming from that area, specifically where the room used to be. TBH, I don't feel her there anymore. There is something alright, nor have I seen her in a long time. That part of the house doesn't have much lighting, and I am a little scared when going there, which I do normally, but truth be told, I try not to pay attention/look too much. I'm open to questions, and if you like that story, I have a couple more, different, not involving children, except the one I mentioned in the story. Oh. Unrelated to La Niña but still interesting. My daughter, 12, used to love sleeping with my mom. This one time my mom told me she had had a nightmare, and when I asked her, she refused to tell me, but she did say, "It wasn't a nightmare. I do not want to talk about it, and I never, emphasis on never, want to sleep in that room again." Fast forward a few months, one time I wanted to be alone in our room, probably fighting over the phone, because I was mad, and I told her, in a bad manner, to go sleep with her grandma because I wanted to be alone and yelled at me. In the verge of tears she said, "I'm not gonna cap all of it," but she was yelling. I told you I never wanted to sleep there again. The last time, something grabbed my ankle and tried to pull me under the bed. I wasn't asleep, nor did I dream it. I got dragged, she is skinny and little, across the bed, and my legs were dangling. I would rather XD not sleep. I'm going to the PC. And I swear the sun caught her playing Roblox. Haunted by a demon. Stories of 3 encounters. I overcame being haunted by a demon. I have only shared this story with a handful of people, but I suppose I am comfortable talking about it now. Back in 2009, I was located in Bakwa, Afghanistan, on top of a hill surrounded by a cemetery. Now they don't bury their dead like we do in the States. Instead, they lay their loved ones on the dirt and cover them with piles of rocks with simple stick-torn clothing as markers for them to visit them later on. I was on my post standing watch. It was roughly 0245 at this time, and I had been on post since midnight. A rock the size of a golf ball smacked the bulletproof glass just above my machine gun. I used my night vision and thermal imaging to see if anyone was out in front of my post trying to get my attention, and nothing but darkness could I see. I calmed my nerves, drank a few sips of water, and about 10 minutes had passed, then bam! Another rock, slightly bigger this time, smacked the same glass. I called the command center to inform them of my situation and asked if they could use the thermal camera from their position to see if anyone was near my post, and he informed me nothing was there. So my mind slightly more weary and on alert, I waited, planning what I would do had it happen for a third time. I would exit my post immediately and fire an illumination round into the sky, lighting up my entire area. About 15 minutes had passed, and then bang! A rock the size of a tennis ball smashes my window. Rocks hitting me in the chest of my flak jacket, pebbles and dust scattering all over my machine gun. So I decided I must fire this illum round and find out what's going on once and for all. As I turned around, behind me in the corner of my post, a towering creature stood. He was at least 11 feet tall. He froze me in place. I wasn't able to speak, scream, breathe, or blink. He was in total control of me. He even controlled my fear. As he stood there with his deep red eyes, I could only make out certain things about him. He had a total of 12 horns, 3 on each side of his face and 3 coming out of each shoulder. He had craters in his face that bugs would crawl out of and into another. His arms were roughly 4 feet long, his hands were giant finger claws, and all of his fingers came to a very sharp fine point. His hands were the size of my chest, just terrifying to look at. We just stood there staring at each other for what felt like an eternity, water rushing from my eyes from the pain of not being able to blink. Until he finally let me blink. Upon that happening, he was gone instantly. I gasped for air and jumped from that 10 feet high post, skipping the ladder completely, and ran straight to the command center. I told him and only him what I experienced up on that post. I was in Baku for an additional 30 days, never once ever looking back towards post one day or night. It's not that I never wanted to share my story, I was just afraid if I spoke of him, he would come back. In 2011, he did. Story 2 of 3. Okay. The second meeting was back in 2011. 2 years had passed since undoubtedly the most terrifying experience I've had thus far in my life. This time I was in a training exercise in the middle of the Mojave Desert. I had this unsettling feeling through the last few days, and I couldn't understand why. It wasn't so much a sick or nauseous feeling, but more like my senses had been heightened, and I could feel this presence of sadness overwhelm me periodically throughout the day. I would catch myself staring into the distance, trying to put my finger on what was going on with me. It had been almost 2 years now since my encounter, and I was back home in the States at this point, so he never came to mind. On the third night of not being able to shake off this feeling, I lay down on my cot. We slept inside a dome-shaped, all-metal building with concrete for a floor, and drifted off to sleep. As I lay there sound asleep, my cot had been what felt like someone at the foot of it kicked it with all of their might. I instantly woke up and looked at my watch, which said it was exactly 3:01. There was one guy awake on the other side of the building who was standing watch. The whole building was pitch black, aside from the 2 glowing red exit signs, one just above his head. I rolled over onto my left side, and there he was, up in the corner of the building, both arms along the length of the walls and his legs tucked up to his chest. His bright red eyes froze my body in place, and the overwhelming amount of fear that overcame my body still to this day gives me goosebumps. I tried calling out to the Marine across the way, but I couldn't speak. I cried out with all my might, but not a sound could escape my mouth. My eyes fixated on him not being able to blink, breathe, or move. It felt like an eternity all over again. He never said a word, never made a sound, but he doesn't have to. His presence is enough, and he knows that. After some time he simply vanished, and I was able to move again. I lifted my head off my soaking wet pillow, turned face down and prayed till I passed out from exhaustion. Story 3 of 3. Before I get into my final experience, I have read all the comments and replied to all that I could. The ones who may have thought it was SP due to the fact that this last encounter is just that, and the first 2 I was undoubtedly awake for. I just want to say I appreciate all the info and comments left on my encounters. Getting different people's perspectives of what it could have been has helped, and I'm grateful. My third encounter was again in another summer month in 2013, 4 years from the first encounter and 2 years since my second. I was going through a rough patch in life. I was getting ready to deploy for the 4th time, and I was going through a rough divorce. My ex-wife was asleep upstairs in our bedroom, and I was watching TV in the living room before bed. I finished up for the night and shut off the lights and TV. The only lights left on were those on the microwave. I fell asleep shortly after lying down on the couch and drifted into a dream. I was back in high school, sitting in the cafeteria with my friends at the time. I had just finished my meal and looked up smiling from my tray when out in front of me, standing between the 2 double doors about 60 feet from me, was the figure. The sight scared me out of my sleep, but I was still stuck in my dream. My eyes could see my living room and the timid light from the kitchen over my left shoulder. My front blinds and the streetlight from the outside shining through it in split sections. I could see my ceiling, everything around me was crystal clear. I was just unable to move my arms or my legs, I couldn't blink, I couldn't speak, and I couldn't move no matter how hard I tried or fought it. Now even though I could see my living room, I was still stuck in his horrible presence. My thought process was that he's far enough away that maybe I can get away. Back in the cafeteria, I stood from my table to dispose of the tray and escaped through the door to my left. As my left foot hit the plane of the doorway, his left hand grabbed my shoulder, and I cried out in pain. Each of his fingers was as big as my hand. His nails were roughly an inch long on each fingertip. As he laid his fingers on my shoulder, his nails pierced my skin, the first 4 fingers driving into my ribs, breaking them as he ripped through my lung, and making their way through my chest and out my back. His thumb driving through my back muscles straight through my spine, snapping it into pieces. I'm crying out in pain as I lay awake in my living room, tears pouring down my face as I remember trying to gasp for an ounce of air. The sheer pain of this allows me to blink finally, and I'm back in my dream, but we are now walking down a road in the middle of the desert. His body is out in front of me, and my body is being dragged face down across the pavement. I can feel the skin on my face being ripped off my skull as he continues to walk down the road. His arm fully extended, pushing me towards the ground to inflict more pain, slowly applying more pressure to his hands so they go deeper and deeper into my body, breaking more ribs as he walks. We finally come to a row of Joshua trees along the road. He stops and looks to the right at a huge weeping willow just off the side of the road and drags me through the sand toward it. Tosses my body like a rag doll at the tree, and I'm now lying on my back just like I am on the couch. Face up, hands at my sides, legs straight out, feet towards him. The sun begins to rise in the distance between 2 mountains. He takes a few steps forward, embracing the heat of the sun, raising his arms up, and extending them out to the sides. I can see the entire outline of this figure, and I will never forget the smell of his burnt flesh emitting off his body as the breeze passes through him. He turns around and faces me, those huge, glowing red eyes feel like they are burning through me. All I want in this moment is to be able to close my eyes so I don't have to see him, but that's not an option because my body will not allow it. He raises his left hand, opening his fingers widely as he swings his arms towards me. Hoping he will not kill me with this blow, his hand drives into the roots of the tree that I'm leaning against and rips out the bottom section. He tosses it to the side as millions of red and black ants pour out from the bottom of this tree. The ants immediately start engulfing my body, crawling under me as if they were going to carry me away. What seems like all at once, he gives them permission to start consuming my body. I can feel every bite from each and every one of them biting into me as he stands there watching me suffer. I can still feel my brain telling my body to move around, but my body still won't allow it. My eyes feel like they haven't shut in an hour, my pillow is so soaked from tears you could wring it out. He walks towards me, placing one leg on each side of my body. He tilts his head towards the sky, opening his mouth, exposing his giant fang-like teeth, and bends at the waist, screaming on his way down towards my body. Just before he gets to my face, I snap out of the paralysis and run to my kitchen, screaming in pain from the ant bites. I can still feel them crawling on me at this point. I flip on the lights while running to the kitchen sink and then turn on the water, using the hose to spray down my body in the middle of the floor. My ex-wife comes down the stairs screaming at me in a panic about what's going on. A few months later I was having a dream of someone guiding me towards a black box that I sent home from my second tour in Afghan. They led me to the box in my garage where it was actually kept, and inside the box was a smaller box. Just as I was opening it, I woke up to a voice saying, "Salvation." Now a little backstory prior to every foot patrol I ever went on during the 15 months I spent in that country. I always wore a bandana, and printed on it was Psalms 91. The next day I went into the garage to open the box, and inside it was my bandana. A week or so later, I tattooed this on my chest and have yet to ever encounter him again. I was terrified all of 2017 knowing he visited me every 2 years, but time has passed on, which is why I'm comfortable speaking about this now. I'm pretty sure I'm being haunted. I've never done this before, so please bear with me. So I'm going to start from the very beginning, 4 years ago. I was starting my freshman year, and my whole family had moved from KY to O. The house was 3 stories, a basement, a main floor, and an attic. Keep this in mind. That also doubles as 2 bedrooms and 1 bath, and that is where my bedroom was. So the previous owners of the house have both passed away from old age, and since they died, the house hasn't been lived in. Okay, everything started happening when school actually started. At the time, my mom didn't have a job, and she just stayed home. One day after school let out, I was walking home when I saw my mom sitting outside. Remember, we had just moved, and there was a lot of unpacking that needed to be done. Not to mention, our front porch was completely bare. She had her head in her hands and was scared. My brother and I asked her what was wrong, and she told us that there is something upstairs. Me being an actual dumbass walked upstairs, but I found nothing. Some time has passed. My mom found a new job, and I ended up staying home one day because I was sick. Randomly I would hear knocking and footsteps coming from upstairs. I've had experience with this stuff before. If you want that story, just let me know. So I would just politely ask it to stop because they were being loud, and it would stop. Some time passed, and not much else happened besides the knocking. One night I ended up having a friend spend the night. I had told her about all the things that have happened in the house, and she came up with the idea of using a Ouija board. I had never used one before, so I said, why not? And we made our own and used a shot glass as the planchette. At first we asked simple questions like, is anyone there? Can we talk to someone? And it went straight to yes. I didn't believe it was working, so I asked a question that my friend wouldn't actually know the answer to. My question was, where are we right now? The planchette spelled out an attic. My friend was confused because she just thought that my room was on the 3rd floor. I explained that I technically live in the attic, and she got freaked out and walked away, so I continued by myself and asked who I was speaking with, and they spelled Lucy. I still to this day do not know who Lucy is, but I just thought, okay, so it's not a demon, we are fine. I then said goodbye, and it went to goodbye, and we put the board away, and again nothing happened until about 2 years later when I got really into the supernatural. I saw a video of professional ghost hunters using an app that they said actually works, so I downloaded it. I got bored one night while doing homework super late in my living room and turned it on, and about 20 minutes later it said study. I flipped shit and was like, what? And it said you, study. And I, trying to be calm, answered, yes, I'm doing homework for psychology. It didn't say much after that until I was about to turn it off when it said no. Watching. Look. Like what? I tried to calmly say, oh, are you watching me? Its answer was no. Not me. I got so scared I uninstalled the app and went to my room. This next incident was right before I started college. I was home alone in the bathroom sitting on my phone with earphones in while taking a crap. Yes, I know, TMI, when all of a sudden I heard a huge crash coming from downstairs. I took out my earphones and heard what sounded like a grown-ass man scream, duck. I then heard the front door open, and that was it. I flipped out. I got off the toilet and ran downstairs about to cry, then I realized nothing had fallen, no one was home, and the door was still closed. I had called my mom immediately, and she came home. Nothing like that has happened since, but since we have been under lockdown, things have been getting worse, and I don't know what to do. At first it was just seeing shadows or people standing somewhere and then disappearing, and now I've just been extremely negative. Real quick, I'm an empath. I get influenced by emotions really easily, like if I'm near someone who is angry, I can feel it even if they aren't necessarily showing it, but with this I become the emotion I'm near, like right now as I'm typing this, my mom is frustrated, and I'm not only getting angry but also supremely ducking annoyed with everything, and that never happens. I get pissed off really fast and easily, and I'm never happy anymore, and when I talk to my mom about it, she told me it's just cabin fever, but I truly don't think so. There was a night that I had a severe panic attack at 12, and it didn't end until exactly 3 a.m. when I passed out as if someone just flipped a switch. I had watched a video of yours that had a story where the person said that negative spirits have a stronger influence over people with fragile mental stability, and right now, with everything going on, I'm at an all-time low. I even tried the wrap yourself in light thing that the same story said to do, and it worked for a second before the light got put out as if someone were putting out a flame with their fingers. I'm not sure what is going on or what to do. If someone can explain what's happening, please let me know.